Hi, my name is Akashi, and today I'll be going over my second place finish in the Vintage Challenge on, I believe the day was the 10th of January. In Vintage Challenge, I chose to play DPS because it's a deck I like a lot. I played with it I guess I played with it for over a year at this point. Obviously on and off, but it's a deck I really like. It does kind of everything I love in Magic. Does like very powerful stuff. Doesn't get bogged down by like interaction like a lot of combo decks in Vintage do with Force of Will and Flusterstorm and Pyroblast and stuff like that, which is fine. I think those archetypes can be cool, but personally I prefer to play something that's a bit more all in. Kind of gets to tutor for everything you want all the time whenever you're going off. I think that's just a really fun way to win. So I really like DPS for that reason. I don't think the deck is always well positioned. I think in this specific meta, I feel pretty good about it. Obviously, it's not the perfect deck. It's not some tier 0 strategy. It's just a decent Vintage deck. And one thing that I think is really important for people to keep in mind when approaching Vintage is that there are a lot of decks like this. Like, there are a lot of decks that are just simply playable. Are they necessarily the best deck for you to pick up if you don't have any knowledge of the format? Definitely not. I think that a deck like DPS, you gain a lot by being aware of what your opponent might have, of the possible interactions, of your place in the specific matchups. You need to really take a lot of these things into consideration to be able to do well with certain decks that are less, let's just say, basically just like powerful on their face instead of being powerful piloted in the right way, if that makes sense. Obviously, I'm not saying any of these decks in Vintage are necessarily easy to play, but I think that some of them are just better positioned because they're able to do their powerful strategy more consistently and more intuitively than others. In any case, DPS is a really fun deck. If you like tutoring for your win con every game, I recommend it. If you like finding interesting, surprising lines to win the game with, it's really fun. If you like being a force check deck, definitely does that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of DPS, and I guess I'll just go over the list very quickly and some of my card choices. So personally, I'm on this build that's not necessarily the most stock build, but to be honest, when it comes to something like DPS, there's not really that much of a stock build. Basically, you're playing a ton of mana map. You're playing 4 Dark Rituals. You're playing all 5 Moxen. You're playing Mana Crypt, Black Lotus, Soul Ring, Mana Vault, Lotus Petal. Basically, all the mana you could ever need in the world. And again, this is because in general in Vintage, one of the most I guess the most efficient ways of getting ahead on your opponent simply by having more mana than them, because Moxen are very good at that. Soul Rings are very good at that. Mana Crypts as well. Lotus obviously does not need much interaction. And so playing a combo deck in general, where these cards all count as Storm count as well. These cards can serve as Tinker Sacrifice to cast it. Really, if you're playing combo in general, you want to be playing a lot of these. Just because they just do everything that a combo deck would want. In Vintage specifically. So as I mentioned, playing 4 Dark Rituals, playing all the restricted cards basically, not all of them, but a good number of them. Probe, again, this fits so well in a deck like this. You're playing it in almost every blue deck in the format. It's just a free card. I mean, 2 life is really not consequential in Vintage. I mean, obviously every life loss is consequential, but in Vintage specifically, it's really not that big of a deal to lose 2 life for an effect as powerful as Probe. Redraws you, counts as a Storm count, goes in your graveyard, counts as maybe your spell mastery for Dark Petition, allows you to see your opponent's hand. That can give you so much information, especially game 1, but even further in games 2 and 3. Playing Recall doesn't need much introduction. I mean, this is a card that basically, if you're able to cast it and resolve it, will usually put you very much ahead in almost any matchup. It's that simple. Brainstorm's fine in this deck. It actually has a lot of cool uses. Interacts really well with Bolas' Citadel. Just a very good cantrip. Chain of Vapor, so you don't necessarily play this in every combo deck. I would even say that you don't play this in most combo decks, but in DPS very much specifically, it is a necessity because there's so many matchups where a certain specific permanent can really put like give you some issues and prevent you from going off, because you're not always gonna have good answers to everything in your deck. You're not because of the way that vintage is. The only way you can really play cards that help you bypass other players' interactions is by playing cards like Duress and Defense Grid. You can't really afford to be playing stuff like Chain of Vapor or even Fatal Push, something like that, because these cards are so bad against certain matchups that they're just not good enough. So Chain of Vapor is a really good card to have one of. You can even Storm with it, like by targeting your own permanents, your own Moxen to generate more Storm count. It's just totally a fine usage of it. And so many decks, if you just Chain of Vapor one of their threats, you can definitely slow them down. Here we have Mystical Tutor. Mystical Tutor and Vampiric Tutor, I guess I'll address them both at the same time, are very, very good in this deck. You don't necessarily want to play these cards in every deck in Vintage, even though they're very powerful, because in a way, they are inconvenient because they make you wait at least a turn before you're able to get a card. Not always, but like on average. And this can be a very big issue in a format that's as fast as Vintage. The thing with DPS is that you're playing really, like, a lot of people, the name of the deck is Dark Petition Storm, but at the end of the day, you are primarily, like, your primary win con, the card you're always digging for almost any time, is Tinker for Citadel. Because this is just one of the most powerful things you can do in the format. With a deck like DPS, you will almost 100% be able to go off because you don't actually have bad hits. Like, obviously you have lands, but aside from lands, in decks like PO, you'll have Force of Will, or you'll have Power Blast, stuff like that. That can be kind of awkward, but in DPS, you just have everything you can cast. There are only a few expensive cards in your deck. It is resolving a Tinker for Citadel will pretty much always result in a win. So this was why you're playing stuff like Vampiric Tutor or Mystical Tutor, because it is that important to get something like Tinker. Obviously, it's not always going to get Tinker. Sometimes your Mystical Tutor is going to get Recall. Sometimes your Vampiric Tutor is going to get Back Lotus. Obviously, it's all very situational, which is very cool, actually. This is one of the really fun things about DPS, is there's very, very often a way out of your position that you might not have seen instantly, but something like Vampiric Tutor or Mystical Tutor will allow you, or Dark Petition will allow you to get that specific card, which is very fun. And satisfying. Ponder, standard cantrip, 3 Preordain. The best cantrip in Vintage that isn't restricted, so you always want to play it. In a deck like this, it adds consistency. Now something that might be different from other DPSs you might see is I'm playing 3 Preordain, and instead I'm playing a Synthesis Dividing Top instead of the 4th. This is a personal preference. I would be lying if I said I ran through all the numbers and tried to calculate everything to make sure that this was optimal. It's just a card I really like in Vintage Storm decks. I think the interaction with Bola Citadel is definitely not something to ignore. I think that it plays very well with certain openers that will have Moxen that aren't blue, that don't produce blue mana, because that way you're still able to use your early mana to cast colorless stuff. This is why I think Defense Grid fits so well in this deck, and why I think that Synthesis Divining Top is quite good. Also it just plays well with fetches, which you're playing a decent number of. I just think it's a card that fits decently well in your archetype, and I think that I've just had very good experiences with it. And I find that Preordain is definitely not the card that is the most suited to every hand that you'll have, basically. There are a lot of hands where I'll have top, and I would much rather have top than having Preordain. So that's a personal preference. You're free to agree or disagree. I'm playing 4 Duress, along with 4 Defense Grid. This is really when you need to play right now in Vintage, in my opinion. I would never cut any of these. I just think obviously post-boarding you might cut, but I think you always need to be playing at least 8 interaction stoppers in a way, because it is just Forceful decks are just that prevalent, and Fluster Storm is that prevalent. And there are enough answers and enough cards that make things awkward for you that you need to be playing 4 Duress and 4 Defense Grid, in my opinion. They also get much better post board against cards like Mindbreak Trap. Again, I just think it's not always been this way in Vintage, but I think that at the moment, I think DPS really does need all 8 of these cards. Here we have Night's Whisper, pretty standard card advantage card. So this is one that was made most popular by PO decks, but I think that DPS has that same same use for it in that it plays like Night Whisper is a card that plays very very well with Moxen, because obviously you're able to cast it turn 1, and paying 2 mana to draw 2 is honestly a fine effect in Vintage, and it's something that especially against more grindy decks that are going to be trading you 1 for 1 ideally, or that will have that will cause you to basically lose a lot of resources related to your combo, just due to their interaction pieces. I just find that a card like Whisper is like so good to. It's just such a fine trade, and it's a hard card for them to interact with, because you never want to counter a Night Whisper. So I like it. I don't think it's the most insane card in the deck. I cut it in a good number of matchups because it's not the most important card in your deck, but I've also had very good experiences with it, so I think it's fine. The Demonic Tutor, doesn't need much of an introduction. It's so good. Because contrarily to Mystical Tutor and Vampire Tutor, while this might cost one more mana, it allows you to get that card the same turn, and that's a huge difference, because you're not always going to have a cantrip to get your Tutor card. It's very, very good. 2 Cabal Writs. This is not necessarily the most insane card you'll see in Vintage. 2 mana for 1 mana gain is not ideal, but I think that you have so many of your impactful cards like Necro, Yogwill, Tinker, Tendrils, Dark Petition, Ballistic Citadel are reliant on generating a good amount of mana to support it. What I mean by this, in the case of something like Tinker, which might be like one that stands out, is that a lot of the time, if you're comboing on turn 1 or turn 2, you want to have 1 extra mana maybe to be able to play around a Fluster, well, not exactly a Fluster, but to be able to maybe play that duress you wanted, play the defense grid before you actually cast your Tinker. So it's a little hard to explain, because obviously these are all like very corner case scenarios, very unique happenstances, but I find that Cabal Ritual fits very well in this deck. It's definitely a card you'll cut a decent number of times, but that does not mean that it's a bad card by any means. Also, Time Walk. You want to play Time Walk in Vintage. It's just such a powerful card. It allows you to get ahead by a turn, allows you to gain card advantage in a way, because there's so many of the cards you'll be able to draw on your next turn that might get you that much advantage. It's a little hard to pinpoint very specifically in the right ways, but basically Time Walk is just a card that allows you to get a ton of advantage in almost any spot, and on the face of it, it's just a totally fine card. Like it just cycles, so it's just something you can play very, very easily. And basically the floor is totally fine, and the ceiling of a card like this is massive. So that's why you want to play Time Walk in almost any blue-based deck in Vintage. Now, lastly, for the 2 mana slot, we have Hurkyl's Recall. Similar idea to Chain of Vapor. You have a very, very, I wouldn't say bad, but I would say very swingy matchup against Chops, in that they're able to set up a lot of cards that will make a lot of your hands awkward. But having something as simple as 1 Hurkyl's Recall in your deck, which you're able to get with your Vampire Tutor, with your Mystical Tutor, with your Demonic Tutor, with your Dark Petition, with your Preordains, obviously your cantrips, it's just such a free card to play in the format. I think in a deck like this, where resolving a single Hurkyl's Recall against Chops will literally win you the entire game. I just think it's a very good card to play in this deck, and it's been played for a very long time. Now finally, these are all the win cons basically. Necro, turn 1 Necro is one of the most immense amounts of card advantage you can gain on turn 1. It is a must force fet. That means that it can be used as force bait, and by itself, if it resolves against the right matchups, it will absolutely decide the outcome of the game, because it's so immense the amount of card advantage you get. And so one thing that people might think, maybe obviously, is that Necro doesn't play very well with a deck that's trying to win with Tinker and Ballistic Citadel, because it gets your life total low. But one thing that I think is very different about this deck compared to PO, for example, in that it's in terms of being Citadel decks, is that you with the mana cost in this deck, you will have the amount of tutors and the amount of, anyway, with the way that this deck is constructed, it is very, very easy to win on 10 life or even lower. I've won on as low as 7 or 6. 6 is a little hard, but all that's to say that a card like Necro really doesn't hurt you that much. That being said, there are definitely matchups where you want to cut it because your total is going to be pressured, and so it's not ideal. So then Maxwell, I don't think this needs that much introduction. I mean, it's just a card that fits so well in a deck like this, allows you to generate an immense amount of card advantage, plays very well with tutors because you have your tutor to maybe get your Maxwell in the first turn, and then afterwards, if you have a bunch of rituals or Lotus Petal or Black Lotus, stuff like that, you'll be able to generate a ton of mana with your Maxwell and then use that last tutor to maybe get back the Tendrils of Agony you need to win the game, or Dark Petition, stuff like that. So, Maxwell, very, very powerful card in this deck. I mean, again, it's one of those cards where it's kind of similar to Time Walk in that the floor itself is totally fine, pretty good, and that you have so many games that are going to be entirely won by the fact that you're able to recur a bunch of cards in your graveyard. Plays very well with Dark Petition as well. So then we have Tinker. Again, this is a Tinker deck in a way. I mean, this is a very, very... This is a card that entirely changed the archetype of DPS. Sorry, Ballistic Citadel did, but like the interaction of Tinker for Ballistic Citadel is massive. Again, Tinker resolving to get Ballistic Citadel will almost always result in a victory. Oh, sorry, my chair's having some issues. Give me a second. There we go. Sorry about that. So again, Tinker very, very good. So easy to resolve this on turn 2, basically turn 1 as well. It's also very I don't know. It's a little hard for me to explain every situation in which this is good, but all I'm trying to say is this is a very good card. It is the bread and butter of this deck. It really, really makes the entire deck tick, in my opinion. And then finally, Dark Petition, the titular card of the deck, is a very interesting card because when you see it, you think, how the hell is this vintage playable, right? And the reality is that essentially this is a demonic tutor, basically. Obviously, there's some conditions, there's some issues with that manner of saying it, but in a way, you're spending 5 mana to get the card that you want in your deck. You're getting back 3 mana, and you're able to play as many cards as you want, basically, as many up to 4, whereas demonic tutor is a restricted card. That's basically the general gist of it. Obviously, the issue is Dark Petition is relying on the graveyard, and that you need Spell Mastery, which is not always easy to turn on. There are some awkward spots where you might not have it on. Obviously, against a leyline or something like that, it can be awkward. It doesn't play very well against a Lantern or a Turmoil Script. And again, the other issue is that you get 3 black mana, which is not great because obviously the chances are that, like, a very good number of the time, the mana you're going to be using to cast a Dark Petition could have been blue mana or the mana that you needed to be able to cast any card that you would get in your deck, if that makes any sense. So 3 black isn't ideal because so many of your good cards to get, well, not exactly so many, but one of the best cards in your deck to get is Tinker with Dark Petition. But there's a very clear issue with the fact that you produce 3 black mana, which doesn't cast Tinker. So this makes for some friction, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is still a demonic tutor. Like, I think even a 3 mana demonic tutor that is so flexible and works so well with dark rituals, I think is still a fine way to look at it, and it's still a very powerful card. Hopefully that made sense. I'm actually the best at explaining cards or stuff like that, but I tried to make it as concise as possible. And here we have the mana base. I mean, it's not too interesting. Playing 4 Underground Sea, this is a blue-black deck. No reason not to play all 4. Playing 6 fetches. I think in Vintage you definitely can get some percentage points by some very, very minor percentage points, but they still exist, by playing a range of fetches. I personally just happen to own 4 Deltas and 2 Tarns, and that's just how I want to play it. I would never blame anybody for playing a split. I think it's technically optimal, but that's fine with me. There is a chance that playing a black basic in Blessing Mire ideally is correct. Listen, I don't know Blessing Mire. I played a lot with this specific build, and I've never really felt any issues from playing the blue fetch. It's one of those things where you need to play 1,000 matches with the deck to be able to really tell if it's actually like a huge difference. So yeah, I'm not sure, but personally, I like this composition. You're playing Tyranny Academy, works super well with this deck for very obvious reasons. And finally, you're playing 2 basics. Wasteland is so prevalent in the format. I mean, against shops against decks like shops, and even some like Eldrazi decks, like white Eldrazi decks, or even some Dredge hands, or even some teamer decks that like happen to play Wasteland for Remnant 6, stuff like that. This is just like, it's kind of a free thing to run. I think that your mana costs are so forgiving in a way with this deck that I think in a blue back deck like DPS it makes sense to play both. Alright, so that's the deck, the 60. Now let's go into the sideboard. I'll try to make this quick. I'm sure this video is going to run long, but I really want to get all my thoughts out because I think this is a really fun deck and I think there's very little content for it. Like most vintage decks, let's be honest. So here, the 3 first slots we're going to look at are Chain of Vapor, Hurkyl's Recall, Hurkyl's Recall. So this is a very, very obvious nod to shops. I think if there's one thing that you need to be doing as a combo deck, it's respecting shops. It's a deck that sure isn't the most consistent, isn't always going to get you, is very play draw dependent, but at the end of the day, you need to respect it because it is a very real quantity in the format. And cards like Hurkyl's Recall completely win the matchup. That's the reality of it. The reality is that cards like Hurkyl's Recall, a card like Hurkyl's Recall will basically win you the entire matchup if you're able to resolve it in almost every situation. And so it's just worth it to play a good number of them. Now, Chain of Vapor, pretty similar, same idea. It's a more flexible Hurkyl's Recall. It's one that's cheaper, obviously. That makes a big difference. So yeah, I think it's a good card. I think it fits with against some other matchups as well. I'll get onto those whenever we get down to sideboarding during games. Then we have to Fatal Push. I think that Fatal Push at the moment is correct because there's a decent number of stuff like Lavinia that's very problematic. There's a decent number of future decks like mono white stuff. There's like the band deck floating around with Archon of Emeria. There's Whole Breach can be problematic. It's not the worst. There's Opposition Agent. There's decks like Bug that play Collector Roof and play Leovold. I just think that all these cards are definitely warrant removal, and I think that Fatal Push is the cleanest in the colors that we're in. So I like playing 2 at the moment because these are all permanents that you need to answer. Now, Blessed Colossus, I guess I'll go to Flusterstorm. Flusterstorm is probably, in terms of interaction for a deck like this, is by far the best way to interact with combo decks and even control decks. It's just, it fits so well in your deck with Moxen and such, and obviously your opponent also having access to Moxen. This is a very, very good card. I think it fits really well. I think it's pretty straightforward. Again, this is a card you want against any Force deck, and a card that you want, especially against other combo decks, because it is your best way to fight back. Because one thing that combo decks like Doomsday or PO or Breach get is that they get access to Forceful, and we don't. So by nature, we are very weak to a certain number of their hands where they will combo before us, or they'll combo in a better way than us. Which puts us in a very awkward position because we don't have any way to fight back. Now, a card like Flusterstorm actually allows us to fight back. The rest does too, but in a less consistent fashion. Now, Sadistic Sacrament, this is kind of a pet card of mine. It's been played by other people, but this is a card I like a lot. I just think it's a very easy nod towards decks like PO and Doomsday. And Breach to some extent, but I'll talk about this later probably, but I would not board Sadistic Sacrament against a Breach deck in the blind. If I happen to know their deck list exactly and it worked, I would, but otherwise I wouldn't. I guess this is one of the most unknown cards in this deck. Basically, 3 black mana, search your opponent's deck for 3 cards and remove them from the game. So against a deck like PO that has only 1 win con in Mentor, well, I guess it has maybe 1, 2, or 3 depending on how many Snapcaster Mages you're playing, but essentially you basically cast this card, and against a deck like Doomsday or against PO, you are killing them in a way. They can do whatever they want. They can take all the time in the world they want. The only other way they can beat you is like by sacrificing stuff with both Cicilla and Kisses PO, and against Doomsday, they really don't have any way to get out of it. So I think this is a pretty free shot to play. It gives you such a better matchup against those decks. Also against the Mirror, I don't really count for the Mirror because I think it's not popular enough, but Obviously, it's very good in mirror, so I think that Sacrament is a very good card to play. I like it a lot. Bicyclastis is one that a lot of people disagree on. I don't think it's that great. I'll be honest. I'll say straight up. I don't think it's that great, but I think that it's a very, again, I just don't find. Okay, so I guess I'll try and explain my point of view with cards like Bicyclastis and Sadistic Sacrament. I find that in Vintage, or at least in DPS, there is a limited amount of cards that you're able to cut. At the end of the day, your combo deck, you have a lot of cards that are so powerful in your deck. The deck is constructed to have the smallest number of dead cards possible. And so, in my opinion, with a deck like that, there is a limited amount of cards you can cut for sideboarding. And there's a limited amount of work they need to do in a lot of matchups. And so, in my opinion, playing 13 very versatile cards and then 2 very specific cards for specific matchups, or maybe like 2 to 3 or 4, I think is worth it. So what that means for me is Sacrament is very, very good against PO, very good against Doomsday, very good against CPS, almost useless against any other deck. Bicyclastis is almost only useful against Chops, against very specific creature decks that I find good in. And it's very limited in how many in the amount of decks that it's good against. But against those decks, I find it pretty good, and I like playing it. And I think that's a good way to get out of unknown cards, basically, that you might be playing that might stop you. You might not have the best answer for them. I think the Return 1 Bicyclastis is just one of the really, really good things you can do with this deck in very specific spots. So I like it. Does that mean it's perfect? No. Does that mean you need to play it? No. This is just my specific list that I like a lot. If you find that it's not good enough, if you find that the matchups that it's good in aren't worth it, don't run it. That's absolutely fine. I wouldn't fault you. I think it's fine. Now, in this specific list, I'm playing 2 Ixalan Jailer and 2 Torment-Script. So, in my opinion, Ixalan Jailer is a card that's really, again, this is kind of a pet card, but in my opinion, Ixalan Jailer is a card that's very underrated in Vintage. No, sorry, that's not true. I think that it's very underrated in specific archetypes. So for me, if I'm playing DPS, I don't like playing Torment-Script because it's not. I mean, I like it, but like fine. I don't like playing cards like Leyline or playing cards like Leyline. I really don't like in DPS. I find that it does not work with your game plan well, of having very strict mulligans and needing as many important cards in your hand or card advantage. I don't think that card makes sense. I think Torment-Script is fine, but it's a little awkward because you can run into cards like you can run into Force of Figures and stuff like that that I don't really like. You can run into Chalice on 0. This isn't like as commonplace, of course, but it's still relevant. But I think that it's good because it still like does its job fine. I don't think it's fantastic, but I think it's fine, and I think that it's a card that's much better in both the Hogaak matchups and the Dredge matchups. So I guess I should specify. I mean, Torment-Script and Ixalan Jailer basically for Dredge, and Torment-Script specifically for Dredge and Hogaak. Ixalan Jailer is only good against Dredge, not Hogaak. But yeah, I think the Ixalan Jailer in this deck is very underrated. I think that it might be even pretty good in Pew. I'm not sure. I don't have enough experience with the deck, but I think that in this deck, I think if you're playing a basically, okay, let me summarize. I think if you're playing a combo deck that has access to all 5 Moxen, even stuff like Mana Crypt, Black Lotus, Lotus Petal, Soul Ring, possibly, I think that. Or Dark Ritual as well, even more. I think you'd be very remiss not to play this card. I just think, I just find that Dredge does not have the breathing room to really sideboard signature against your deck. It just makes so little sense. I think it's very awkward. If they do, at the end of the day, you probably got some amount of advantage against them if you happen to not have Jailer in your hand. That I just think it's so perfect against Dredge, and it is one of the only cards in the format that I think actually stops Dredge from ever winning. And that's why it might be the only one, I'm not sure. And so that's why I really, really like Jailer. And now you might be thinking, why aren't you playing all 4? Well, because Dredge isn't the only deck in the format, because Hogaak is a very well deck you need to pay attention, because Jailer has some issues in that it's 2 mana, it's a bad hit off of Citadel. Torment Skip is just so much better for Storm Count, better off of Citadel as well. Can sacrifice the Tinker if you happen not to use it. It's just Torment Skip's upsides that I think are worth. And Jailer has some downsides, but I think that I really like playing at least 2. So that's why I'm playing these 4 slots. And then the last card is Snow Covered Island. It's the 3rd basic. I think that, again, you want to respect shops, and I think that this is one of the easiest ways to respect it. It's just good to go up a land. There's very rare matchups that are more controlling where I might board in land. It's rare, though. It's mostly for shops. And yeah, that's basically it. That's the deck. It's a pretty long deck, so hopefully you stuck along. I hope most of the stuff I said was interesting. And yeah, I guess I'll get into the matches right away. Thanks. Alright, let's get into the first match. And here I'm playing against Gur5559. This is a Japanese player that has been playing Dredge for ages. A good way you can know that it's him for sure is that he's playing 62 cards. He's been playing 62 card Dredge for, honestly, I don't know how long, but it's been a very long time. I've never played Dredge. I've never played Vintage without knowing about Gur. He's a very interesting Dredge player, and I find this is pretty cool. But anyway, all that to say that I'm on the play and I know what I'm playing against. I know I'm playing against Dredge for a fact. For me, there's no question in my mind I'm playing against that deck, which will definitely influence my keeps. So here, this hand is nuts. I mean, this hand is well, okay, this hand's not nuts. This hand's interesting, but it has some very glaring issues. So basically, Chain of Vapor, completely horrendous against Dredge. The rest, great if you have a backland. Dark Ritual, great if you have a backland. Tendril is awkward. In any case, this hand is so close to being great, and it's being very much held back by the fact that you don't have access to a black land. And also, a very important thing to keep in mind is drawing a mana source that allows us to tinker on turn 2 maybe is not really good enough because chances are so high your opponent's going to have interaction. So I decided to ship it. This hand is rough. Again, this is one of the hands you'll get sometimes with DPS where you have a ton of mana, but you're not able to do anything with it. In my opinion, these hands are not great, so I decided to mulligan. Here we have a fine hand. I mean, Black Lotus, Minor Kip, very good cards. Cabal Ritual, not very good. The rest, fine. Here I believe I decide to keep this hand. I ship exactly Cabal Ritual and land because I think with this amount of mana we don't need an extra hand. And so here, it's all about whether I'm able to find a relevant card with Preordain. Both these cards are completely useless. Defense Grid is really good against the matchups, but in this case, we don't want more interaction. We want just a way to win because we have a very good hand to do it. They have Hollow One, which is great for them. We rest them. We are able to take. I believe I take Notch to Survival because, in my opinion, it just makes more sense to take than it does to take something like Force of Vigor. I could be wrong about that. So here I draw Defense Grid for the turn. I guess I'll leave it on play, but so here they just get to go off. I mean, they have Double Bazaar. There's not much you can do about that. Like, Defense Grid's fine, but at the end of the day, I'm basically living out the top of my deck. I'm also being pressured by my Mana Crypt. They get to Cabal Therapy me. I actually think it was correct to play Black Lotus for whatever it's worth. Like, I think that was a misplay. So I'll just say that. And here it was actually a very big misplay because with that Demonic Tutor, we'd have been able to win most likely. We would have had enough mana. So it was definitely a misplay not to play the Lotus because it played so much into Cabal Therapy. So that was a mistake. That was a mistake on my part. And that's one thing I want to preface before getting into all these different matches. Is that I'm not a perfect player. I love this deck and I played a decent amount of it, but just to give some context, this is a tournament that's happening at 3 a.m. in the morning. I haven't slept for a while. And even then, as a player, I'll make mistakes, and I find that I'd rather present a bunch of matches where I make mistakes and can learn from them than just not presenting them because I made mistakes. I just think that's not less useful. So, again, big mistake. Should have played Black Lotus. It was just a much better card to play that spot than not playing it. So, because obviously, there was no reason not to play Black Lotus, basically. It was just a mistake. Now, getting into game 2, I'm not feeling too good because I think that Dredge is like a fine matchup, but I mean, obviously it hurts a lot if you throw game 1. I decided to keep this hand. We have Torment Crypt, which is like good enough to slow him down. And we have access to Tinker eventually, you know? Like, this isn't a great hand, but at the end of the day, I got lucky enough for to have my opponent mulligan to 3. Here, punished pretty hard by the fact that I didn't play Tournament Script. I guess I'll pause just to talk about that. So you might be wondering, why didn't you play Tournament Script? Well, in my opinion, there is a decent chance that my opponent... Like, I would rather put my opponent on Force of Vigor, which I think is a good card to board in for them, than to put my opponent on specifically Chalice. So the only way that we get punished in this spot for not playing it on that specific turn is Chalice. Because Force of Vigor, against Force of Vigor, it's better. Against Force of Will, it would still take 1 or 2 turns before I think that's realistic to put them on that. So that's why I didn't play it. But I'm not sure if it was correct. I think it makes sense, but obviously it has some issues. So here, not much to do. We don't get to do anything. They don't actually have a Bazaar. They have to keep with 3 with basically nothing. And we get to cast Jixer Jailer. There's no way they can win from this point. We can take all the time in the universe to win this game. They can't do anything. So obviously, this doesn't feel great because we let them know that we have this Jailer in our decks, and they might board in the Sickening Shoals, but that's fine. Here we just get the combo off of Boost to set it all. It's going to go pretty quickly. Again, a Chalice isn't actually an issue for this deck. It's mostly... the real issue is mostly that it slows us down in early turns. Like, it doesn't prevent us from winning, though. Alright, let's get on to Game 3. And I will say, I do think I got somewhat lucky in this matchup, just to be clear. They're on the play, which is very good for them, but they mulled a 6, they mulled a 5. I mulled a 6, that's pretty... I guess maybe... Give me a second. I'll replay because I want to go over my mulligans. I think that's important. So here, let me go over that. Sorry about that. Here, I don't think this hand is good because it basically does nothing. I mean, obviously, casting Defense Grid, very good for setting up for later turns. But if you don't have a win con, I basically never keep hands like these because you need to have a way to win. There are a lot of ways to win in your deck, but most of them require at least some supporting cards. Or at least some other card advantage cards that are able to get you in a position where it's safe to resolve them. And this hand is close to doing that, but I don't think it's good enough. So here, I mulligan, find a hand with Necro, along with Recall. I mean, this is just a hand I would always keep. It feels so good. We get Probe to even check for interaction. I mean, this is a very good hand. I don't think Necro is great in this matchup, so I'm not initially going to prioritize it always. Because they have many ways of pressuring a knife total, namely Creeping Chill, but also stuff like Icarid. That makes me really not that interested in some spots. Some other spots, obviously, I'll cast it, but just something to keep in mind. Now, they mulled a 4. We're somewhat lucky in that sense. They have a Bazaar, but them mulling the 4 is so bad for them. And I guess I'll talk about that for a second, is that it might seem like, you know, against Dredge, mulliganing the Bazaar is just fine. I mean, there's no punish. You just have Bazaar. How can you lose a game? But the thing is that a lot of the matchups that you're going to play, you need a certain number of cards to be able to have force and to have stuff to pitch to it and such. So a situation like this where you are, how should I say this, on 4 cards against a combo deck is not great because the chances you're basically not able to activate your Bazaar for turn 1 if you want to hold up an interaction. Like, there's a ton of issues. I hope that was clear enough. So here I probe, I see they have a second Bazaar. This is very good for them because the biggest issue with this position for them is that they were not able to counter my stuff. But the flip side to that is that they can just dredge so much and activate Bazaar so many times, they just get to race me, basically. They get to do so much damage and so get so many cards that they just put me in a really bad position. Now here, I wasn't interested in playing Necro because, again, we're pressured down by a Hollow One. It doesn't really make sense playing Necro. You're not going to get that many cards or you're going to basically kill yourself, so I don't like that play. And there's some amount of reasoning to playing Defense Grid, but I don't think it makes sense. I know for a fact my opponent can't have Force. I know it's going to be ages before they can have Force, so it doesn't make sense to me. It's unfortunate because basically in my top 11 cards, for example, well, 10 cards, I have 1, 2, 3 cards that I'm never casting. But I do have 1, 2, 3, 4 cards that I'm pretty interested in casting. Now there's definitely an argument to going Ritual Elixir Jailer instead of holding up Recall, but my reasoning was, I guess there's some amount of there's an argument for that. My issue basically was that I felt like a lot of hands that I was likely to draw into would require me to use that Dark Ritual to win on the next turn because I was being pressured. Whereas Elixir Jailer was great, but I was still being pressured by a Hollow One. I wasn't really getting ahead in the game. I had no idea what I was going to draw a Recall. I felt like it was a little awkward, and so I would rather have taken that hit. I guess looking back, I think there's definitely a good argument for doing the other play. I'm not sure which is better. I'd be lying if I said I was sure. Alright. Now they hit Creeping Chill. This is bad for us. Brings our life total to a pretty low number. 11 is kind of rough. And they also get to activate Bazaar back that twice. That's very bad for us. They have Cabal Therapy. Very good for them. And they get to cast it. But they have to Name Taker in the blind. This is like unfortunate for them because they don't have the bulk Cabal Therapy. And this is where I get lucky because they actually happen to not hit the second Cabal Therapy. And here, I believe... Yeah, I'm basically just trying to cast Elixir Jailer to basically stop them from doing anything from that point. Because if I cast Elixir Jailer this turn, and again, I don't think this means that I was right to not cast it the last turn, but here I'm in a position where I got very fortunate that they didn't find their second Cabal Therapy, and it puts me in a situation where I'm winning for sure. So yeah, basically that's it. I'm playing Elixir Jailer. Well, I'm playing Preordain first to see if I can fire Dark Petition. And there, I decided not to go for the win because the big issue with this position is, I believe, there's definitely a chance that they had Mind Break Trap in hand, so I didn't want to play into it. And I was not able to win. I was not able to play Defense Grid plus Dark Petition that turn, and there's basically 0-0 disadvantage to waiting a turn because they can't do anything. Their entire deck is turned off by this Elixir Jailer. So yeah, here pretty straightforward. I just cast Dark Ritual. I play the Defense Grid, or sorry, I play a Dark Petition because it's my second stall of the turn. And then I cast Anchor because I'm convinced. I guess this is actually a misplay now that I think about it. I think I was supposed to play Defense Grid at some point in there. If I was trying to respect Memory Trap. So yeah. Didn't play this optimally. Got rewarded by my opponent not having the card that was perfect. The Noxious Rival just showed me to have some stuff because I Torment Script. Don't think I played this game perfectly, but again, that's what I meant by the start of the match by saying that I got decently lucky. Alright. So, I mean, I'll keep watching, but basically it's pretty straightforward. We just go get Tendrils of Begany, win the game. There you go. Yeah, so we won 1-1 against Dredge, which is a difficult matchup. We even lost game 1, which was really rough, but we got lucky enough, so it worked. Alright, now I'll get into the second match. Be right back. Alright, so one thing I'd forgotten to do for my first match against Dredge is to actually show the sideboarding because I think it's interesting. I just forgot to do it, so I'm going to do it right now. So when I'm against Dredge, I want to be sideboarding these 4 cards, and that's and 2 Fluster Storm, sorry, and 2 Fluster Storm. So my reasoning is that I think the rest on average has, especially in when the more popular build right now with Dredge, I think, is with Noxious Survival. I just think that the rest itself has some issues and can kind of be awkward because yeah, that's the reality of it. I think that the rest is awkward because they have so many. It's so easy for them to top deck the right card, basically, or to top deck some way to stop me, or even Cabal Therapy is something you can't interact with normally. I just find that Fluster Storm is the better answer. Does that mean the rest is bad? No. Does that mean I cut 2 to rest, add Fluster Storm? No. I just cut, in this specific matchup, I would cut 1 to rest because I think it's too many answers otherwise. But like I just think that Fluster Storm is a better answer in some spots, and so I like it better than 4 to the rest. That's my reasoning. I don't think 3 Fluster is correct. I only board 3 Fluster if I know that my opponent is a combo deck, and so it can be a proactive card in a way that because I can stop their combo. If I'm saying it's a control deck or a deck that can play controlling cards, I don't want to board all three. I think it's usually incorrect. This, as far as the cuts for these cards, it's -1 Oracle's Recall, -1 Chain of Vapor, -1 Night's Whisper. I don't think this card makes a lot of sense. This is not really a matchup where you want to get like incremental card advantage. And it's a matchup where your Electoral totally matters and can definitely affect the outcome of the game. So I don't think that I don't like this card in general. Then it's one Cabal Ritual. I just think this is one of the weaker cards in your deck. And finally, one Preordain. Again, I don't really mind removing my consistency for like some amount of like I don't think Preordain is like a key card in this deck. I want to make that clear. Like that doesn't mean I want to cut it all the time. I actually cut it very rarely, but in some matchups I think it's totally fine because I think a lot of the time you'll be keeping hands that won't be reliant on Preordain getting you good cards because you're adding. That's my logic basically. Is you're adding 4 cards that against this matchup are essentially GG, right? Or essentially like game, and I think that on average, that basically means that the number of cards that would how should I explain this? So what that means to me is that I have more whammies, like more and more cards that are like haymakers, and so I think that it makes for a larger range of hands that I would keep without needing a Preordain to get me towards my win, if that makes sense. I can definitely see the other side argument, which is like, sure, but you can also keep a hand with Preordain that lets you get that card, but I usually really don't like keeping cards in this matchup in matchups like these that don't have the haymaker and are relying on Preordain to get it. It happens, but it's iffy. So I think Preordain is the right cut. It's one of the few times I'll cut Preordain, but I think it makes sense here. So that's my sideboarding against Dredge. It's a lot of 1-ofs, but I think they are the cards that are the weakest in the specific matchup. So that's sideboarding for Dredge. Alright, now getting into my second round, funnily enough, I was actually playing against Ekaros, who is a streamer that I really like, and I'm actually a mod in his chat. So that was very unfortunate that we ended up getting paired. And I'm on the draw, and I know what deck they're on. I know they're on 4-color Breach, which is stressful. I mean, this is a deck that I hadn't played that much Vintage in recent times, so I wasn't too familiar with it. But I'd seen a decent amount of gameplay with it. I knew the game plan. I still felt okay in the matchup, but it was definitely scary. At least one good thing that I knew in the matchup was I knew his exact list because I just happened to know that from seeing him play with it, so that helped a lot. Or at least it helped a decent amount. Anyway, let's get into opening hands. I guess I'll hide chat. So, first hand, I think this is a very, very good hand to keep. Defense grid is perfect because we're so worried about them having Force of Will or Pyroblast because that can definitely stop us. We get access to 2 cantrips. We're even able to cast one of the cantrips on turn 1 and cast Defense Grid. I mean, I think this is one of the really good hands that you want to keep in this deck. My opponent also keeps on 7. They cast Preordain. Okay, don't know much about what's going on. Here I play Soul Ring, I play Defense Grid, and they actually Force of Will this Defense Grid, which I think is fine. It makes sense, because that means they're able to keep other interaction, like Pyroblast later on. Sorry, I guess I should specify those 3 cards I wasn't interested in. I think they're, if I remember correctly, at that point I wanted to just find another piece of interaction, which is not what I was seeing in those 3 cards, and I didn't feel like I needed any of them. They were, I believe, mana. I think it was all three were mana, something like that. And I don't need mana at this point. I have Dark Ritual plus Soul Ring plus Max Sapphire to cast this Dark Petition. I don't see any need to keep any of that mana. I'm just looking for interaction at this point, or maybe another payoff that I can use this counter bait. And I do have Brainstorm to get another card if I whiff. I happen to whiff, so Brainstorm's still going to be useful. Fortunate that I whiffed on exactly Underground Sea, because obviously I'd rather have a fetch, which plays a lot better with Brainstorm, but it's not really the end of the world. Now, my opponent happens to top deck, well, not top deck, they happen to to just have Mana Crypt and Tinker, and they just combo me out of the game. Not much to see here. Now, at this point, so I just want to mention this. So here I'm actually playing this pretty slowly by like clicking with everything, and the only reason I'm doing this is because I want to see as much of their deck as possible. I'm totally gonna acknowledge that is a bit annoying, but like I'm mostly trying to make sure that I see as much information as possible from their deck through Brain Freeze, while also, as soon as they cast Brain Freeze on me, not show them my deck. That's the only reason. I will admit, a bit annoying. It would annoy me to do it, but I still think it's the optimal thing to do. Not much to say. I know their whole list, but I just wanted to make sure. I just think it's the optimal thing to do, so I just played it like that. Anyway, I don't really need to go over this. I mean, Breach is pretty straightforward. You just cast Black Lotus, then you cast another Brain Freeze, and you cast Brain Freeze on your opponent. It's pretty simple. You might even cast multiple Black Lotus to improve your storm count, like raise your storm count. That happens. It's really not that complicated. They even have mentors that prevent me from doing anything, really. Even if they whiff, which they can't, they would still have an army to kill me. It's really not close at this point. Yeah, so we're out of the game. I'll just stop it here. Not really much else to see. I don't think there's anything I could have done differently in those turns. I just kept a hand that ignored the combo, and they happened to have a turn 2 combo. It happens. That's vintage. And it's also the reason that combo decks are scary matchups, because they have both interaction and also other hands that can just combo you faster. What's a saving grace in this manner is that we, if they keep the wrong hand, for example, if they keep full interaction, we have a defense good hand or the rest hand, they're in a rough spot. If they have a combo hand and we combo them on turn 1, rough spot. So that's what it's important to keep in mind. They just happen to have both, which is tough. That being said, Forcible didn't really matter in that spot because they didn't have, they just depended on defense grid. So, yeah. So here, I'm on the play. I guess I can talk about my sideboarding. I guess I didn't do that for round 1, but let me pull up my, I believe, yeah, there you go. So here, in this matchup, what I do is I go up 3 Flusters. I go down a Hurkyl's Recall, a Chain of Vapor. I guess I should go look at my deck if I want to do this, huh? Alright. Collection. So here the sideboarding is minus Chain of Vapor, minus Hurkyl's Recall, minus 1 Grid. And then one thing that I think is possible. Oh yeah, and then I go up 3 Flusters, and that's basically it. So the reasoning here, Chain of Vapor, Hurkyl's Recall, useless against your combo deck. There's not a single card from your deck that you want to be using these interaction spells on, or these answers on. And the reason I'm cutting a defense grid, which might be surprising, because you might think, well, why would you want to cut a card that's good against decks with Forcible and Pyroblast? The reasoning is because we're adding 3 Fluster Storms. I mean, you don't really want 12 cards in your deck that interact with the stack. I think that even 11 is a lot. Sorry, even 10 is a lot, but sometimes it's necessary. And I also think that the reason I cut this, for example, over the rest, I think the rest is better because it tops our combo, possibly. And I think the Fence Grid does not play very well with Fluster Storm, so that's my reasoning. So that's why I did those cuts. Now, one thing that I did in this specific case is I knew Icaros's deck list, so I knew that I had very, I guess I should say, I knew that Sadistic Sacrament was one way to actually stop them from winning, so I decided to board it in. That being said, it's only because I knew my opponent's deck and I wouldn't do it otherwise. Now, I cut 1 Cabal Ritual. I'm not 100% sure about this slot. I could see the argument for it, I could see the argument against it. The argument against it is because, well, obviously Sacrament is cast a lot easier with Cabal Ritual. The argument for it is that Cabal Ritual is still one of your weaker cards in the deck. I'm not sure which is better. I think Cabal Ritual is fine. Could be wrong, though. That's not like a perfect science or anything. So yeah, so that's the sideboarding I did in this specific matchup. Let me get all this stuff back. And there we go. Cool. Now let's get back to the match. Here I find a hand that's insane. I mean, this is a super, super strong combo hand. Obviously, does not have any ways to interact with force, but especially knowing my opponent's mulligan to 6, I don't think it's the right thing to put them on force in most cases. Well, that's not true. I think it's good to put them on force, but I think that when you're on a mulligan to 6, you're gonna have to keep some hands that get shafted by force. It just happens. So here I bought him Soul Ring. I just think it's a card I need the least. It's the least mana efficient card. Preordain, just in case I can find an answer. I get Vamp. That's pretty good. Not the most needed. Dark Petition. One thing I want to note. It was definitely the right thing to tap this mana crypt for the Dark Petition, but one thing that is really annoying on Magic Online is that if you haven't tapped a mana source, it doesn't give you the option of using it if you have enough mana to pay for the full spell. What that means is if I have 5 black mana in my mana pool, and I cast a Dark Petition, it's gonna automatically use all 5 mana and not let me use my mana crypt if I didn't tap it beforehand, because it assumes that I don't want to use anything else, which in this case was annoying because it is optimal to play the mana crypt. Anyway, so here just want to get Yamat's Will. This allows me to replay Black Lotus, allows me to replay Dark Ritual, allows me to replay Dark Petition, and there we go. There's nothing else that we can use. So here I also used Vampire Tutor beforehand. My reasoning was that I don't mind the life loss. It allows me, if by any chance again, if my opponent has some card that I haven't thought of, if they're maybe holding up the force for whatever reason, they're maybe trying to do something that I'm not sure about, MBT obviously being a big one. I had seen his deck list, so I was pretty confident that they didn't have MBT, but you never know, anything's possible. I just think it's optimal to play the Vampire Tutor because that way you are able to set up the top of your deck in case that you whiff. Now here I go for it. You just go for Tinker after casting Yarmouth's Will with these cards and you just win. It's pretty straightforward. So here, make 3 blue, keep 1 blue in your pool, Dark Petition, get Tinker. Or I guess, actually, my bad. Sorry, we have Tendrils. We have a Tendril skill, but yeah. Sorry about that. Pretty straightforward match. They just happen to not have Divorceable, which will happen. This is a very real thing that happens with DPS and in Vintage in general. They can't always have Forceable. And it is a good amount of the time, right, to go for it, even though they might have it. There you go. So, let's get into game 3. Oh, sorry about that. Let me get back to the match. And so now we're in game 3. Really close matchup. I think we have both decks are pretty even in this matchup. I don't like being on the draw, but I think I have some good tools for the matchup. I really like my Fletcher Storms. I like the possibility of Sacrament. Let's just go for it. Let's go into it. Now my opening hand is one that is, let me remember, I don't think this is good enough because in any case this is gonna need something else to get there. The rest is not that good. Tendrils is fine, but it's got some awkwardness. Yagwell doesn't even work well here because you're not even, the only way you can cast it is by tapping, basically there's no way to go for some amount of value without putting yourself even behind on certain resources, and I just don't think that it's that good. You don't have enough to win, so you're gonna need to rip something. I just don't think this hand's good enough. Wait, I kept that? Oh my god. Okay, well, my bad. I think this hand is very close, I will say that. Basically the idea is that if I happen to draw some amount of card advantage spell, I'm on the draw, it's not too bad. The rest is top, maybe their combo. Listen, I understand why I kept this hand, but I am very much unsure that this is the right keep. My opponent went against the 6, that's good for me. They just play Volk. What I will say is that the only reason I kept this hand is because I happen to have the rest. So even if I wasn't able to draw the right thing for maybe the first turn or second turn, I was still able to get myself in a decent position, a comfortable position by having the rest. That is the reasoning. that's my reasoning. Yeah. So here, I wanted to. So here, what I wanted to do. So my reasoning here for this play. So there's definitely a world where casting duress is correct. I will say this much. And I think it's a totally defensible position. My reasoning was that I believe that them holding up the specific mana made it seem like they were trying to hold up Pyroblast. And so my reasoning was, well, if they're keeping a hand, especially on a 6-card hand, it's much more likely you actually happen to be on a Pyroblast hand than a forcible hand. And I knew they play Pyroblast. My reasoning was that, maybe they're trying to keep exactly that, and in that case, it is better to go for Ballistic Cell this turn because it bypasses Pyroblast. That's my reasoning. I could totally see casting the rest on turn 1, but yeah, that was my reasoning. I also didn't like that the rest had some chance of getting Flusterstorm. That was also like an annoying thing, I felt. I could be wrong about that, again. So yeah, I'm in an awkward position because I went for that. I feel like the rest play might have been better. I'm not sure still. Again, I make mistakes, and I'll make other mistakes in this in this tournament, and you'll see that. They happen to have Fire Blast, so interesting to note. And they only had basically useless cards left in their hand. I took Fire Blast because, in my opinion, the majority of ways that we win in this spot is like, I'm not scared at all about their Breach and their Mushroom. Yeah, all they have is a Pyroblast and a Forcible in their hand. I just don't think those are cards that are worrying. I think Breach does nothing in their hand. I think Ruby doesn't do anything. I don't think they have that many draws that let them get back into the game, really. They have a few, but they don't have that many. And I think that Pyroblast is the only card that can really stop me from my position, most likely. Anyway, so here, not drawing that's not true. Not drawing a great card that turn. Only one card I don't know. Storm is not a great draw. It doesn't really do much in this matchup, but it's still fine. It doesn't do very much in this spot. Alright, now they cast Narset. That's an annoying card, but one thing I want to note about DPS is that it's a deck that is a lot better against Narset, because a lot of your wins don't even involve you drawing cards. Now I draw Dark Ritual. This is perfect. This allows me to just go for it. This gives me enough mana to go for your Dog Will and to be able to recast my Ballistic Citadel without a land drop. I happen to have Fluster for their Fluster. I mean, Dark Ritual was one of our best draws in the deck, but there were other draws that let us get out of there. And there you go. So now we just cast a bunch of rituals. We just don't need the rest because we know their whole hand. Actually, that's not true. We did not know their whole hand. We only knew 2 of them, but there's no card that they can have in their hand that can stop us because I knew their deck list. So yeah, I decided to go for it. Didn't even need to cast the rest. And there we go. Now I will say, I think there's actually a very good chance that I would have won this game. Actually, that's not true, is it? Let me think. So the issue, like, let's try and go back a little bit because I think it's an interesting discussion. Let's go back to turn 1. If we duress, right? So we know they had 2 Forcibles, right? So this is a scenario where if we duress them, they have 2 Forcibles. If we take one of them, they don't have a blue card left. But there's a very, very good chance they would draw a blue card. So there's definitely hands where casting duress on turn 1 is not that good and even gets like almost no value because they still get to keep Pyroblast, which later on would have made a difference. Do it make a difference? I'm not sure. All I'm trying to say is that there's definitely an argument in both sides, and I feel like I liked it at the time, but I might have been wrong, and I think the rest might have been better. I'm not sure. It's just an interesting position, basically. All right. I'm gonna get into the third match. Alright, so getting to match 3, I'm against John Smith 2373. If I remember correctly, I'd actually had experiences playing against this player when they were on shops, so I was pretty sure they're on shops, which is still important information. And I'm on the draw, which is really, really bad against shops. This is not what you want at all. This is a very, very play draw dependent matchup in my opinion, and that's why I don't like it very much. This hand is terrible. This hand does nothing, not mana to do anything. Here we have a fine hand. We actually have one of the best cards in probably the best card in the matchup in Hurkyl's Recall. So I really like that. The rest of our hand isn't very good, but it's still fine. The bottom is definitely defense grid because there's nothing to interact with, basically, that defense grid would be good against. The only reason you might want to keep defense grid is if you think that your best outcome is like your best winning line is by bottoming below Citadel, and you think that you want to have an artifact to sack the Tinker. But I think that on average, if you're drawing 3 cards on top of your deck with this Probe and this Night's Whisper, chances are you're going to find some amount of artifact. I just don't think that's a very logical reason for keeping grid there. Now that Mox Barrel, along with the Crucible of Worlds, I'm very happy about this. Until they show me the Chalice, that's annoying, but it's fine. Oh wow, that went really bad. That went really fast. My bad. So, Gataxian Probe shows me they have basically nothing in hand. They have a Wasteland, which is annoying, but I mean, it's very easy for me to play around it. That's why I got Island with my Polluted Delta. They have Godfire Statue. They're pretty far from casting in. I mean, they need a pretty good whip to be able to do it. Stormcold Serpent is not really too much. It's some clock, but it's not really the end of the world. And here, Chalice is annoying, but there are definitely a lot of hands where it won't matter. So I think this is fine. They actually happen to top deck Golos and Golem, which is like really annoying because this is a sphere effect that would basically the biggest issue in the Shops versus DPS matchup is sphere resistance, and effects like Trinisphere and Golos and Golem, and Thorn of Amethyst, because these are cards that make your deck so much harder to play through. They basically remove the entire possibility of Tinker, because if all your spells cost one mana extra, the whole idea of Citadel being insane doesn't apply anymore. So these effects are very problematic, and you need to answer them. So them top decking Golos and Golem is very bad for us. That being said, we are still able to cast Demonic Tutor. My reasoning is I want to get Black Lotus because I'm still in a position where I can use Hurkyl's Recall, because they only have one taxing effect, and after I do that, I can just cast a Bolus to Citadel, so I'm actually in a really good position. They did me 5, which is annoying, and I'll have to take some amount of damage next turn, but... Sorry, not next turn, I just get to combo this turn. And this is actually pretty fortunate because I happen to draw exactly the Mox for it, but that being said, any land was enough to be able to go for it, so that was fine. And now we get a good example of how Necro is like so good in this situation with Bolus Citadel, because it allows you to basically exile any card that's bad on top of your deck if you have enough storm count. Anyway, we win. Pretty simple victory. They didn't keep a taxing effect because they didn't know we were in DPS, and obviously their hand was fine in a lot of matchups. Chalice didn't happen to really impact us too much, and they never happened to draw their Mishra's Workshop to cast that Godfire Statue, so we were in a good spot. Now I'm gonna go to game 2. Here we get the sideboard. I guess I should show you my sideboarding. Oh, sorry, this is already pre-boarded for... Give me a second. There you go. So, that kind of messes up the order. That's fine. So here, my cuts, the cards I want in are 2 Hurkyl's Recall. Obviously, again, like I've said, amazing card in the matchup, makes all the difference. Chain of Vapor, pretty decent. I like Bite Steel against Shops. This is a personal preference. Obviously, you might not like Bite Steel as a card itself. I think it's fine. I think it's pretty good in this matchup. I think it allows you to bypass stuff like I think it allows you to still win with Tinker hands through sphere resistance effects. And in my opinion, that's one of the most cumbersome situations that you can keep me in, is when you have like a very good Tinker hand, but it doesn't work because Bolus still won't be actually doing anything, whereas getting Colossus would be great in that spot. Now, one big issue, I think, in the Golos matchup, which I happen to know this Golos because they play Crucible and they play Godfire Statue. I think that in the Golos matchup, there is an issue in that they play Mirage Mirror, which is able to copy Red Steel Colossus, but I think I still find the card fine in that matchup, personally. Then I want one snow-covered island because of wasteland effects, and also just having more lands to be able to maybe play around sphere of resistance effects. Now the cuts are pretty straightforward. They are 4 defense grid. This card doesn't really do anything in matchup. The only thing it does is basically prevent Midrange, but it's not even that good at doing that because your opponent's going to have a decent amount of mana, so I don't really like that reasoning. I don't really like keeping gridded. I think it's pretty bad. And we also want to cut 1 Night's Whisper. And that's basically it. Because Night's Whisper is not very good because it costs a decent amount of mana. Card advantage isn't really the issue in a matchup, and it loses you life in a matchup where your life total is pressured usually. So that's my reasoning. Now, my opening hand is pretty decent. So it's on the draw, which is not great, but we get access to Chain of Vapor. This is going to be enough to get us a win. We get access to Mana Crypt, which is definitely going to help you bypass some of the issues with Sphere of Resistance. Get access to Duress if we can get their second Sphere effect, that can be really good. Time Walk's a fine card as well. I think this is a fine hand. It's not amazing, but it's totally fine. So here they have Black Lotus, Moxjet, they cast Grave Digger's Cage, pretty rough for us. This makes a lot of our hands worse. They have Chalice of the Void, basically kills 2 of our most important spells in our hand. Really not a fan of how this is going. I actually think so basically my reasoning for not playing Mana Crypt there is I'm not sure it's correct, but in my opinion, I think that it's very unlikely that my opponent would not play their Sphere Resistance turn 1. I just think in any case it's better than playing Chalice on 1. And so my reasoning is I think I would rather play towards making Revoker worse, and this is a perfect example of it, than playing towards like exactly a top deck Sphere effect. I just think that makes less sense. Now they have Mystic Forge plus a Fierce Revoker. That is kind of brutal. A lot of pressure on the board, especially with the card advantage they have right now. We basically have nothing going on, right? We draw Push, which is fine. I mean, it's going to save us life, but in terms of how the game is going, it doesn't really do anything. Time Walk, fine. We find Bolus Estelle, which is is an awkward card because so the reason that Bolus Estelle in a specific situation is awkward is because, yes, we have the Chain of Vapor for Grave Digger's Cage, which turns it on, but they also have Chalice, which basically means that Dark Rituals are not a way to get to cast it, so you need to draw exactly Black Lotus or 2 different Black Lotus, which is kind of difficult. Maybe a 3rd Black Land would be enough. It's a little difficult though, like mana-wise, because they have so many good top decks in terms of Sphere effects. They have Crucible. This is really annoying because this means they have like infinite Wastelands. We get pretty lucky there because we draw we get a basic land, which is pretty good in the spot. Still just waiting, not much else to do. Oh, sorry, my bad. I can't even use Chain of Vapor to bounce Grave Digger's Cage because of Chalice, so we're actually in a pretty awkward position here. Basically just waiting to draw maybe Hurkyl's Recall. They have Sphere, super rough spot, we're losing life, doesn't feel great. Also, I just want to note that I did play this Fatal Push earlier, but I think it is correct to play it because it might not be the one that you're supposed to play, but it allows you to have Spell Mastery for your Dark Petition if you happen to draw it and it works. Lotus Petal, pretty good draw actually. Guesses that 3rd black mana, which is nice if you ever want to cast Citadel. Again though, still waiting for Hurkyl's Recall. That's really the only thing I guess is out of the spot at the end of the day. And we find Demonic Tutor. There you go. Now we're there. We get to just not play on the sea because we want to have access to more mana. And we're just waiting to Hurkyl's Recall. Now the big issue is that we'd have to wait an extra turn to get there. And when they play their Sphere Resistance, like I know I'm just dead. There's no way I can win through that. With 2 spheres, it's just not going to work out. We're going to lose too much life. We're going to be in a really bad position. I think casting Hurkyl's Recall there is kind of spewing, but at the end of the day, I think it is almost impossible for us to win from this spot. So I did not feel particularly good about the spot anyway. I think 2 spheres basically prevents us from winning ever. I could be wrong about that though. Yeah, I believe I played this match poorly though. Because I think if I had just held, I think there was a chance of winning. It required us winning like a lot of minor crypt flips in a row, but I still think it was correct. Anyway, we died. I think it was definitely a winnable match. If I had not played that last, I think it was a close game. If I had not messed up that, if I had not like spewed that Hercules recall. So here, yeah. So we're 1-1 now, going into the third game. Let me go back to the game. Give me a second. All right. So game 3. We are on the play, which is really, really good in this matchup. Makes a huge difference. Although we do have to be scared of a memory trap. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. This hand is insane. This is a turn 1 Tinker. Oh, sorry about the noise. Unfortunately, it doesn't play around a memory trap, but I still think I would keep this hand. I mean, this hand is still very, very good. We can play around it in a way, but I don't like that because I don't like waiting because it's weaker against Grab-Digger's Cage. It's weaker against Null Rod. It's weaker against Fierce Invoker, so I don't really like waiting too much. Here I decided to go for it, and they don't have it, and we just win the game. It's that simple. Their hand was fine. It was 2 spheres. I mean, I would keep that anytime if I were them. And then we just win. It's very easy to win from that position. So again, just had to kind of had to not respect the memory trap, which happens. There you go. So we win. Now I will see you guys in match 4. Alright, so at this point I'm 3-0 and I'm feeling pretty good about this event because this is a smaller event, 63 players, which means only 6 rounds. And 3-0 basically locks you almost. Not exactly, but with good breakers pretty much locks you for top 32 because there's a lot of people that drop and such. So I feel pretty good about my position. I'm excited. Might be some difficult matchups. Had some good draws, but that happens. That's basically vintage. And I'm playing against Discoverin. Discoverin is a bit of a crusher. Pretty good at drawing good cards. Very scary player to play against. He happens to have a lot of experience in vintage, and is definitely a very good combo player. So I know they're on combo. I actually knew prior to this, due to a friend playing against him, that they were on 4-color Breach, which is different than a normal deck of Doomsday. So that was good to know. And since I had already won the matchup against Ikaros, I felt kind of decent about it. I'm on the draw, which is really not good, but that's okay. This hand I would keep always. Has Mana Volt, which is mana. Has Divining Top, pretty decent card advantage, period as well. And we even have a turn 1 Necro. I mean, I feel pretty good about this. That being said, we are on the draw, so our opponent definitely can have a hand that just tops everything that we want to do this game, but I feel pretty decent. Now, I cast Necro because I'm pretty confident it's going to catch a Force. And my plan basically is to like slowly get to position, eventually get to a position where I can cast Mystical Tutor to get a Tinker because we have Mana Volt that plays very well at Tinker. That's my reasoning. Record Shield, totally fine card. Helps our mana a bunch. Pretty happy with the spot. Cast Divining Top, I think it's a good card to play in this specific position. Because in the case that they have other forces or an interaction, it's a card that's going to be able to get us out of that awkward spot. I still think that it's right to Mystical Tutor instead. Go for Tinker. Now I put the casting program on top because I want to be able to see their hand to see if I'm ready to go for it. I see that I'm not ready to go for it because they just have the nuts. At this point, I just want to note, I do not think this is correct to do. Like, I don't think this was the right thing to do necessarily. Like, the way I shipped it, I think I was more supposed to think about it and ponder upon it longer. I was a bit frustrated that they had, like, double Force and Fluster. I'll admit that. I think it's important to admit that stuff. And I kind of rushed into things. My reasoning for going for Tinker here is I know it's catching answers. I know it's catching Fluster Storm, which is annoying because that means they get to keep Force. But provided don't draw a blue card, we're in such a fine position because we just get to use Dark Petition next turn. And Dark Petition can easily get us in a winning position, basically, from this spot. We know we have Dark Petition on top. With Dark Crit, we get to cast it. We get... they only countered it, so we get to Yawgmoth's Fall, and I believe that with this, maybe not that turn, but maybe the next turn, we would be able to wait, no, because I think I had mana as well, right? Yeah. So I think with mana, yeah, I believe we were able to Dark Petition on the following turn, and just win from that position to be able to get another Tinker. So in my opinion, this is still a good position, good thing to cast. There's also definitely consideration for maybe waiting, using Dark Petition to maybe go for like something like the rest of Grid because they might not counter it. Not sure. I sent it this way, and I think it still makes sense. Gets countered, obviously. We're not paying for that. Now we cast top. That I mean, it's just a good way to use your mana that turn. And then they top deck Preordain, which is scary. Interesting that they would cast it, but it makes sense at the end of the day. And now their Preordain found exactly Narset, which is really, really bad. And not the static effect is annoying, but it's mostly because it, first off, almost assuredly gets them blue card, right? It's like so unlikely it doesn't get them a blue card for Force of Fall, but it's gonna get them another card later on to maybe get them back and get them even more card advantage. This is a very, very bad card to see at the board. One of the worst cards they could have had against us. Preordain was already a good draw, but this was even better. And that's really rough. I mean, it makes us have like a very difficult position. They put Mystical Tutor in hand. At this point, I'm convinced that the only way I can win this game is by playing into this position and just getting them to use their interaction, because it is less likely they're able to maybe find another force and a win con. And I want to get the Mystical Tutor out of their hand because Mystical Tutor wins in the game by just getting Tinker. They find Force Negation. By far the worst thing they could have found with this, because it counters everything in their deck that could be a win con as a top deck. And it doesn't even require another blue card because they just get to hold up mana. Also, to be clear, their hand is these two cards at this point. So again, frustrating outcome, but at the end of the day, like, this is Vintage. People are gonna get lucky. There's no reason that you should like lose your marbles because of this. I'll admit it's like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. at this point. I'm a little annoyed. It happens. And I'm basically convinced I can't win the game from this point. So I just kind of check on top of my deck. I see Recall. It's fine, but it's like, when the hell are we ever resolving that? I don't think putting Chain of... Well, no. It's the reason I put Chain of Rip in my hand is because I'm like, oh, well, maybe I can like bounce Narset and get the result of Recall. I don't know how. They would have to play pretty badly. Then I see Mystic Sanctuary. They get back Preordain, and I'm just like, yeah, there's no way I'm ever winning this game. I check top of my deck. I'm like, no, it's not gonna happen. Like, I'm gonna wait until they're in the end step to see if they misplay, but like, there's zero chance I discover and misplay this from this position. You get to steal my card. I go for it. They've drawn a blue card for it. No, they haven't. But the issue, it doesn't even make sense because they just get to like, bouncing doesn't even make sense because it would give them a blue card for Force Negation. But at the end of the day, like, this is still fine because it would basically remove their Force Negation while also removing the Narset, which is still like somewhat maybe a winning position for us. They've stolen our mana. It's still bad, but I think it's fine. And then they have Forcible, so there's just zero chance we can win this game. They just top deck. They drew very well, which happens, but yeah. So they drew very well. We really didn't have much of a chance at that game. I don't think we could play much differently. And I don't think that waiting on the Stinker would have made much of a difference. Game 1, feeling pretty down, obviously. Pretty rough way to lose it. Now, I'm not really going to show the sideboarding again. Same thing as the last Breach opponent. Just we don't board in Sacrament this time because I don't know their hand. I don't know their 75 exactly, so I don't think it's reasonable to board it in. I even saw like Dak and Narset and Mystic Sanctuary, which isn't necessarily stock, so I don't feel good about bringing Sacrament in a position like that. Now, round the play, I do like that. And we have a fine hand. I mean, this isn't like insane by any means, obviously, but it's a cantrip, it's a tutor. I feel like against a decent range of hands, this is gonna get us somewhere, so I keep. With Preordain, we see a card we don't want, which is land, but we see the rest, which is nice because it allows us to maybe clear the way soon enough. Obviously, this assumes that they have a slow hand, but that happens. Like, that's not impossible. They have a slow hand, and here. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna restart the match because I wanna stop on that. Sorry about that. I wanna stop on that very specific time because I made a very, very bad misplay that basically lost me the game and lost me the match. And while I was down a game, I still think it's very much likely that we could have won game 3. So this was a big throw at 3-0. So it's important to note it. We have the rest. They play a bunch of mana. And here we have double duress. Now this is not a spot that's gonna happen a lot. It's pretty rare to get double duress, but here I make a like brazen misplay. So I play my second land just in case they have something like days or something like that. I just think it's like probably better. It doesn't make a big difference. Or to represent like a fluster or something like that, or like a recall. I duress, and I see their hand. Now this is a very frustrating hand because basically they have mana, they have a tutor, they have surgical, which can stop a decent, which can really put a wrench in our plans. And they have 2 permission spells. Pretty annoyed seeing that, especially after the way the last game went. And so I'm like thinking on what the right take is, and I get to the conclusion that the right take is just force negation and mystical tutor. In 2 duresses, because it just makes sense. I mean, it's just, first of all, there's the one card that's the least problematic in a way. We can never lead the mystical tutor because they just get to get tinker. So we have to take that one. The surgical extraction, we can play around that, like especially knowing about it. Force negation is really by far the worst out of the 2 because they can actually cast it pretty easily. And first of all, would require them to draw a blue card afterwards. Now this is where I make a huge misplay, and this is just, honestly, this is just like a lack of attention and just kind of playing like loose. Here I take force negation first. Now, this might seem innocuous at first, but it is a very bad play because when I cast my second duress, all they have to do is simply cast mystical tutor in response, and then they'll get their thinker on top, and I'll have basically thrown the game, and this is what happens. Yeah, take force negation, take mystical tutor. I mean, again, this still hurts to watch, even after having suffered through it. Very big misplay. Again, like I said earlier, I make misplays in this tournament, and I think they're important to note because there are things that you might even miss yourself. Like, hopefully you don't, because this is a pretty big misplay. But yeah, so yeah, through the game. Now, again, like I said earlier, you might think, I mean, you already lost game 1. You're gonna be on the draw. It's a medium matchup. Like, it's probably not the biggest mistake to make, but it's very, very much likely, especially in vintage, for your opponent to maybe just mold a 4 or something like that, or mold a 5. Like, these are not impossible situations. It's not impossible. You get an insane hand. Like, so making misplays like that will cost you so much. Yeah, lost against the cover and feels pretty bad, but it happens. Now I'm gonna move on to match 5. At this point, we're 3-1, by the way. All right, so in round 5, we're against Sway-Jisset. That's the that's only, I'm not sure that's the way to say it, but I think they are a European player, and any time I play against them, any deck I've seen from them, they were always playing mono white taxes basically in vintage, like stuff like Dahlia, Spirited Labyrinth, etc., a bunch of mocks in the ramp it out. And so I was already kind of annoyed to play against that. It doesn't feel too great. It's a pretty bad matchup for this deck. But we're on the play, which means that we have a lot of, like, a pretty good chance of having just absolute heaters. And this is an example of that. So if they happen to have an artifact problematic, we have recall, which is good. And we just have a turn 2 tinker and a really good turn 2 tinker at that. So for me, there's a very important decision, right? If I'm against mono white taxes or any deck that plays Wasteland, basically, because if I play my Underground Sea, it's better, right? Because that way I can tinker on the next turn without having to play a second land drop, right? So Underground Sea, play Soul Ring, next turn, tinker, and we won't have wasted our land drop, which means that our Bullet Citadel will be very, very unlikely to whiff. Now the issue with that is that if they have Wasteland, we are cut off of our only blue source, and this is very, very problematic because there's not like an overwhelming amount of lands that we can draw, cards that we can draw that finds us that blue source, and so it's a very, very real concern, and that's why I decided to go for for swamp first, because I think it just plays way better around me Slan. I don't think missing a land drop is the end of the world. And at the end of the day, chances are they're going to have maybe a Thalia turn 1 or something like that. And in that case, it just makes more sense to play it this way. We're going to have to play our second drop anyway, so it's fine. Now the Gataxian Probe means to see my hand. Pretty good information for them. And I see Bayou. And then I'm like, oh, wow, okay, this is a bug. Not at all the deck I would ever put my opponent on. I mean, I played against them before. They've only played a mono-white deck. But in this case, they chose to play bug for the event. I believe this might have been the first event they played with it. I'm not sure. I don't know them personally, but pretty interesting tidbit, I guess. So they have Bayou. They have 7 cards in hand. I can basically 100% put them on force, right? At this point, I think it's very much correct to put them on force. And so I decided to go for Ritual in order to DT, Demonic Tutor, for a defense grid, I believe, right? No, for the rest, yeah. So my reasoning is that, sorry, I should specify, the reason I didn't go for defense grid, which in some matchups would be correct, is because I know that my opponent plays Assassin Trophy. I might even play Rub Decay. And because of that, I find that getting defense grid is definitely a weaker line, because I think it's more likely to have Assassin Trophy plus maybe Force than it is that they have double Force, for example. That's my reasoning. And also, especially with them keeping a hand with Bayou specifically, I find like that kind of hedges me towards that, with them not having a turn 1 play. That's my reasoning. So I decided to go for the rest instead. Definitely not the most exciting Demonic Tutor target, but it was right in that spot. The reason I used my Dark Ritual, by the way, just to be clear. So now, okay, yeah, the reason I use my Dark Ritual is because I'm not going to need it to win the game. I have well enough mana to cast Tinker. Even if they Assassin Trophied my Soul Ring, for example, I'd still be in fine position. And if they happen to have nothing, like no second force or whatever, I can just Tinker. I'm going to have exactly enough. I'm going to be missing my land drop, but it's not really a big issue. In my opinion, it's not really that big of a deal. I think it's worth going for it. So there I decided to go for it. And the reason I take Assassin Trophy with Duress over Collective is because Collective isn't the end of the world for us. And Assassin Trophy really can be problematic if we whiff and they are able to remove Verbose Citadel. Now I go for it. Pretty straightforward. We whiff, which is annoying, but we made the right choice, and so all they can do is just play their Oof, which is fine because it really does not hurt our combo that much. And there you go. So now go for it. I think I played this game pretty well. Could be wrong. I mean, I think they also kept a pretty bad hand. There you go. So pretty straightforward. Just use Agmon Tool, do a bunch of stuff. We won the game. We just go get tendrils. I'll stop it there. It's not like too important what I get. There you go. So here, just gonna go in game 2. Now I'm on the draw, and I mean, if your opponent knows what the matchup is, like it's definitely more likely to keep a much better hand than what they had that game. I think for most bug matchups, that's probably a pretty loose hand to keep. Oh, sorry, I should. My bad, I always forget about this. Let's get into the sideboarding. Bug is an interesting matchup. For me, it's... oh, shoot. Then D-board from shops. My bad. Keep forgetting. Sheen Vapor. Defense Grids. Night's Whisper. And Snow Covered Land. Right. So this is the composition at the moment. Now what I want to do for sideboarding is I want 2 Flusters because they play a lot of instant sorceries that interact with us. And I want 2 Pushes. I think Push is really good against this deck. They play Leovold, they play Tarmogoyf, they play Deathfire Shaman, they play Collector Roof. These are all cards we want to be killing a lot of the time. They'll be very, very good targets for Fatal Push, so I like this card a lot in the matchup. It's actually one of the only matchups making me play Push along with Jeskai. That's my reasoning. So as far as cuts, a lot of decks, I like a lot of her deck. Here I would cut Hurkyl's Recall. I would cut Preordain. I'm not sure this is correct, but I think on average, I don't necessarily, especially even against a deck that plays Leovold and Narset, like I don't feel too great about cantrips to begin with, and I think that Preordain a lot of the time Yeah, that's my reasoning. My reasoning for cutting Preordain is that a lot of the time in this matchup, if my first play is Preordain, I think I probably have a weak hand. So again, kind of similar reasoning to Dredge. Then I want to Sear It. I just think it's the weakest card in our deck, most likely. And then one is Defense Grid. I think that since we have Push and Fluster Storm, I like this. I don't like Defense Grid against a deck that plays Okos and Assassin Trophies that much. I think it's fine, but I still don't like it that much. So there you go. That's my sideboarding for Bug, I believe. Yeah. Cool. So let's get back into the match. And round 5, game 2. Oh shoot, I'm already in. Sorry, bit of a klutz. So I think this hand is really nice. I like a lot of stuff about this hand. I mean, we have a tutor for a win con. We have Preordain, Ponder. Maybe you can get us towards ways to stop them from stopping us, basically. I think this hand's really good. We have 2 lands. It's pretty nice. All right. Now here they recall us. This is really, really bad because at the end of the day, one big weakness in my opinion for Bug is that they're a 1-for-1 deck, and so if they're not able to accrue some amount of card advantage, if they have to mold a 6 or 5, I think they severely set them back. Now in this case, I believe my opponent kept 7, and they even had a short recall. In my opinion, this is like one of the worst things you can see, because for a deck that trades 1-for-1, if they're able to get ahead of you on cards, you're buried. Like you're in such a difficult position most of the time. So I play Mana Vault. I think that's the best turn 1 play, because I think that it allows us to maybe go for Mystical Tutor Tinker, basically, if they play something that makes me think that's correct. I could be wrong. I'm not sure that's the right play, but I like it in that specific spot. Here we have a interesting top of our deck. It was, I believe, well, it was Writ, Dark Petition, something else. I think Dark Petition and Writ are both very good cards to have here, because basically we're going to be able to maybe, not saying this is going to happen, but if we, sorry about that, if we Mystical Tutor, we start like putting some pressure, cast some win cons, some spells that would put us a lot ahead, like very much ahead. They're going to start using the Forcibles, they're going to start using stuff like that. And so getting Dark Petition is very good because it allows us to basically have redundancy in our hand, and that's really what we care about. Our hand is not choked on mana; it's basically only choked on win cons, and in my opinion, that's the best way to approach a matchup. Now they take 4. Not sure what they kept, obviously, and they cast Oko. Oko is annoying because sorry about that. Oko is very much annoying because it's it severely hinders our ability to use Torah Academy, which was a very good card in this position. And it removes 3 mana, basically. It cuts 3 mana from us because of Mana Vault. So I'm not happy about this, obviously. And in response, I decided Mystical Tutor. I'm usually assuming that's going to resolve because at the end of the day, in a lot of cases, it is correct to let it resolve because you're just going to counter what they get. You faded a draw. My opponent forcibles it. I don't know the exact hand that they have right now. I don't know this is correct exactly. I'm not a bug master, but I think that this is not correct in most cases. Maybe they're very much worried about some sort of tendrils line. I could see that. Still don't really like it. Anyway, so you have what's really nice also about Mana Vault is that it allows us to deal 2 damage to them. So that makes it so a lot of our tendril skills are a lot more likely now. But they still have 5 cards in hand, so I'm not like necessarily going to run into it, you know. Keep Dark Writ. I attack. And here, okay, well, I guess I lied. So I am willing to go for it because I think that it's not very likely to have second force. If they have it, I'm still like removing a lot of cards from their hand. I still have push to answer some creatures, and I still feel fine about it. I'm not sure this is correct again. For me, the biggest reasoning for doing this is that I was very much worried about my opponent untapping basically and getting access to stuff like Assassin's Trophy to maybe kill one of my lands, or I guess that wouldn't really make sense, but have Wasteland. Wasteland is a big concern. I didn't know whether they could draw Leovold, whether they could draw, there are a lot of draws or a lot of cards they could have played that would put me in an awkward position, in my opinion. So that was my reasoning. I didn't also want to give them one more draw towards forts. I mean, they had an active Sylvan Library. I feel like I want to pressure them when they have an active Sylvan Library. Like, I want to get in when the getting's good, So yeah, I go for it, and they do something that I think is correct, but goddamn, it feels bad for them. They force my Dark Ritual. Now, this is the reason they do this. This might seem very strange, but the reason they do this is because we would be able to tendrils them from this position, and I think it is correct to force this, but it feels very bad. And at the end of the day, it's still going to stop us from doing our combo. Like, it's still going to stop us this turn. It's just bad for them because you get to keep a Dark Petition. So, yeah. You're still at 7. I mean, this gives us a lot of outs. They put on top. So here, a big thing to note is that there was definitely a big drawback to giving me a 3/3 because I basically put them in a situation where they can't activate library anymore. They can't pay life with library anymore. Now they trophy us, which is, I'm not sure if this is correct. Again, I'm not in the bug player's shoes, but I feel like this isn't correct because it gives us mana, and I do think that it's pretty clear this is an issue for us at the moment. And I feel like there's got to be other ways you can stop me from, like, I don't see why this is a concern. At the end of the day, you're gonna be able to have food. You're gonna be able to like negate any 3 damage I deal. I just don't think this is correct. I think I have a lot of ways to mitigate that issue of having a 3/3, but clearly my opponent is very convinced that it's a problem and decided to do it. I think it's interesting. I time walk because that's my draw for turn. And play my land, and here I'm basically just waiting to draw any well, not this turn, but like the next turn. No, this turn does work. Yeah, if I draw a Mox, I would be able to cast Dark Petition, get Yamatswell, then like somehow I'd be able to like replay my land, and what I'm trying to say is that I'd be able to set up a line with tendrils where I would kill them, because I think it's kind of clear at this point they don't really have anything to stop me at this point. Maybe they have Force of Vigor. It wouldn't really stop me in this case. I'm not sure what they have, but I don't think that like anything that they have in hand is realistically going to stop me. I really doubt they play in BT. If they play one, they play one. And that's basically my point of view in that position. So here I don't draw Mox, I draw a second Dark Petition. Kind of awkward, but not the worst draw, because if we draw a land at one point, we can still like chain Dark Petition to Dark Petition. They create a food. I think this is a very bad play. Like I just can't understand why you would do this, because clearly one of the most worrying things about this position is the likelihood you can die to the tendrils on a very low storm count, right? So I don't see why your priority is attack me for 3. It's gonna take you ages before you can kill me. Like, I'm very, very far from dying. You give me a lot of draws, whereas you could just have your 3 life. You could be at 10. I don't really get this line, but they did it, and it was interesting. And then they played Deathrite and Collect Roof. And so now I understand that their reasoning was, well, I'm gonna have 3 creatures. I can probably get some lethal pretty soon. I can maybe hurt them with Deathrite Shaman. Like, this isn't too bad. Which is fair. That's fair reasoning. But I still don't think it's correct. Now I have the push that I've been holding for ages for Connect Roof, which is good because it makes a lot of our Mox draws a lot better. And here I draw Flusterstorm, one of the worst draws in my deck. Doesn't further my game plan at all. It's protection, but at this point I'm almost 100% putting my opponent on no protection. That would be like interacted with Flusterstorm. And I'm just not comboing, and I don't really like this position, obviously, because my opponent has like so much advantage they can have. Also, one other big thing about keeping a food is that it makes it so you're able to pay life with Sylvan Library. Like, this is totally relevant. I think that making this into a food, while seemingly innocuous, I think is very, very relevant. So I don't like it. Now they top deck R6 Cage, pretty rough for me. I mean, obviously the top deck that they would have played it earlier if they didn't. This is annoying because it cuts off my Tinker lines, but I'm fairly certain I can win without Tinker mattering. Oh no, sorry, this also cuts off my Yamato lines, so this is kind of annoying. Because it means that I don't have them. My number of draws that I can get here are very much reduced by this Cage. They attack me for 3. They hold up Dark Shaman. It doesn't really matter at this point, Death Shaman. And here I draw the Mana Crypt. Mana Crypt is definitely one of the better draws in the deck. But like Black Lotus would have done it, Dark Ritual would have done it. Anything that gained me 2 mana basically would have done it. I believe. So here the line is very simple. It's Mana Crypt. I can do this, right? Yeah, okay. Oh, right. Same. So Mana Crypt. Now you cast Dark Petition. You go get Black Lotus. Sorry, that's not true. You want to tap. No, it is true. Sorry. So you get Mana Crypt on board, cast Dark Petition, tapping the Mana Crypt, plus these 3 lands. Then you get Black Lotus for this Dark Petition. Use the Dark Petition, sack it for 3. Sorry, you don't sack it for 3 yet because you tap Sortorian Academy to get 2 mana exactly. You have Black Lotus that gives you 3 other mana. And then you get to Dark Petition for Tendrils, and you get to Polluted Delta, and that's exactly 12 damage, and they're exactly 11 life. Because they get to gain 3 life from the food, and they get to gain 2 life from the Dark Shaman. Now, the craziest thing is, they actually had MPT, and I happened to have the first storm. So definitely, because of the way that the game went, I think I drew pretty well, probably. But I still think there are other draws throughout those last 2 or 3 turns that would let me do a win. Anyway, so we'll see how it proceeds. Yeah. I also really don't like doing it then. You should not be giving me information that you don't have any card that you can cast. I just don't think that's correct. Because it can definitely impact my way of playing. Anyway, Tendrils of Agony, we got there. Feels very good. There we go. They have my Ray Trap. We have exactly 1 mana to counter it. And there you go. So really interesting match. Interesting game, exactly, especially because we won with a very unconventional line. But that's the really fun part about this deck. You win with a lot of unconventional lines, and it's really fun. Alright. There we go. Now we're going to move on to match 6. Alright, so moving on to round 6, I'm playing against Benibo. Benibo, I had seen more than one result from them playing Oath, so I was putting them on Oath in this tournament. And here I have a hand that's, I don't think is a hand you can mull. You get access to a ton of mana, you get access to Preordain, get access to Dark Petition. I just think this is a hand that very, very easily results in a Tinker kill, so I just think you need to keep this. And again, especially against Oath, I mean, there's so many hands that they keep where they just actually have like a fast combo, and that fast combo doesn't really get the affect you too much a lot of the time. Now they have Black Lotus and Mishra's Workshop, so we realized they're actually Golos shops. Pretty annoying. Definitely didn't prepare for that mentally, and obviously a very bad matchup on the draw. But, you know, nothing's impossible. They have Sorcerer's Spyglass, which is really annoying because it turns off for Polluted Delta, which can definitely put a wrench in her plans. Or it can name like Narcomoeba, sorry, not Narcomoeba, Necropotence. So kind of an annoying card. Doesn't seem like too bad. And then they have Sphere Resistance. So basically had like 2 very, very good cards in the matchup that lined up very well with each other, because that means we can't actually cast these Moxen to get our Mount Sphere because we don't have the land to be able to cast them. So basically at this point there's no way we can win this game anymore. We need like insane draws, and then they have Mystic's Forge, so I know it's already over. Like there's no way I'm winning here. I think I played out just for like playing it out. But yeah, we're dead. Pretty frustrating. I'll play it out. I mean, I was just waiting for them to like put some amount of pressure on me or whatever. They cast Stone Serpent. Or no, they cast Mirage Mirror. And I was just like off it. I was like, yeah, there's no way I can win this game anyway. Feels pretty bad. I mean, basically it was a game where we had like no decision to make, basically. Like there was no hand that we could keep that would have beat that hand most likely. Like Strip Mine, Double Sphere, plus Sorcerer Spyglass, plus Black Lotus, plus Workshop. Like, it's a lot. Alright, so now for sideboarding, let me show that pretty quickly. Sideboarding for shops is pretty straightforward. Have I shown it before? Oh yeah, no, I have. Okay, cool. So same sideboarding as earlier. Again, I'm willing to show it again. It's just like plus Recall, plus Chain of Vapor, plus Bicycle Colossus, plus Island. Take out the defense grid, take out Nice Whisper. Pretty straightforward. Alright. Now details. Let's go into game 2. It's already just to mention, I'm at 4-1. This is a win-in. It's 6 rounds. Winning this round means I'm in top 8. I'm locked. I do have the best breakers by a pretty large margin. I'm pretty confident I'm gonna have the best breakers, even if I lose this. Although it's a bit dependent on some of the results of the people I played against, but I was pretty confident that I was able to have the best breakers. I just happened to play against people that were very, very high up on the leaderboard at that point, which is very, very fortunate. But again, I'm going for the win. I mean, obviously, I want to win this match. Anyway, so I decide to take the play. I think this hand is not keepable ever. It just doesn't do enough. Because it doesn't actually do anything that's proactive enough to be able to recoup the disadvantage you're going to get from them almost certainly having a Wasteland, a Sphere, and then BT, something like that. So I mull, then I mull, and again, I have to keep one of the worst hands with the deck, which is does nothing, has a ton of mana. We can't even cast Oracle's Recall. This is like a terrible hand, but there's no way we can win on a mull of 4. And if you spike like a blue land, there is a way we can win here. They just have Sphere, which really rough. Draw Ponder, doesn't matter anymore. We don't have a blue card. And then they have Mirage Mirror, I believe. No, they have Chalice on 1. I mean, again, even further reducing our chances. We have blue land, which is nice, but it's not like we're doing anything. So here the very, very big issue is that I would love to wait. I think we're actually in a pretty good spot to wait and like take the game slowly. But they just happen to have Thespian Stage plus Dark Depths plus Fear Resistance plus Chalice plus Moxen. So like very rough spot because they're both pressuring us in terms of like force, like they're preventing us from comboing because of Sphere and Chalice, but they're also threatening a kill next turn. So we're forced to Heroic's Recall and hope that our Ponder somehow finds the best card in our deck. So we do that. We try to go for that. Heroic's Recall. Then we Ponder. We have a blue land, which is nice because we can find Tinker. It's not good enough. We shuffle. We find nothing. And we're dead because we can't beat them from this point because they just get to kill us with Dark Depths. Pretty frustrating turn of events. Really not what you want in your, winning in. Yeah, so we're out. And crazily enough, we actually managed to top 8. I don't really have a screenshot of this, but we happen to have by a good margin the best breakers, and we're able to place in top 8 because with the exact number of 60 people, there's gonna be 160. There's gonna be, is that true? 160, 6 5-1s, I think, and then 1 4-2, if I remember correctly. Could be 2 6-0s, I'm not sure. In any case, there's gonna be 1 4-2. I'm 4-2 at this point. I managed to get in, sneaking in, feels very good. Alright, now I'm gonna go into quarterfinals. Alright, so in quarterfinals now, as you can imagine, I'm over the freaking moon. Like I'm in top 8. I snuck in. I made some mistakes that really cost me a lot. I was pretty frustrated by them. It's like 8 a.m. at this point. I am exhausted, but I am ready to jam and try to get in there. I asked my a friend of mine who had played against this player in the last round what they're on, and they tell me they're on Hogaak. This is honestly this is music to my ears. I'm playing against Hogaak. This is by far, I think, the best matchup in the format. It's very, very favored for you. They don't have anything to stop you. A lot of the time, their clock is enough to actually prevent you from doing anything. Hogaak is one of those decks that like has some okay game against combo, not very good game against them, and just has like a fantastic matchup against shops and Xerox decks, control decks. So definitely like a fine deck in a metagame, but against this specific deck that I'm playing, such a good position for me. So I'm really happy about this. I'm on the play, feels even better. my hand is Dark Ritual, Dark Petition. This means that we have a turn 2 Tinker because of the Mox, and we are able to use the Ancestral Recall to basically get like enough card advantage to make that a reality for sure. Basically, at this point, if I see this hand, I'm not worried at all about the possibility of losing. They would have to kill me on turn 2 basically to prevent that, which is almost impossible. Burning Catacombs, I recall on their upkeep. These 3 cards were pretty bad, actually. All we needed is 1 land, which was good, but then the 2 other cards are pretty useless. It's fine. There's really nothing that I'm worried about. If they had missed it, but they would have used it. Deathfire Shaman is not an issue at all. Dark Rit, Dark Petition. I think there's just to be clear, I think there's an argument for winning, but I don't think that it makes sense because I already have lethal. Like the only argument for waiting, what's the argument for waiting? No, there really isn't. I mean, it was just 3 arguments. We'll kill. Just go for Dark Rit. Well, like recall, but like we're so likely to hit. I think it makes sense to go for it here. And then we just have Xaxes because we get Black Lotus. There you go. Pretty straightforward. Sorry, yeah. I guess I misspoke a little bit, but yeah, pretty straightforward. Really very hard to lose in that position. And again, like even then, if it's pretty much impossible for them to have MB team on board, it's just not playable. They would have had to have like misstep for our ritual that they would not have used on a recall, which seems very unlikely. So yeah, I think we were very much locked in that position. The only issue was like a Wasteland on turn 1, but it's very rare that Hogaak is going to play Wasteland on 1. And even if they do, like we still had so much recourse, we had double land, it wasn't an issue. So I think very much in the driver's seat for that game and felt pretty good. Now as far as sideboarding for this matchup, I think it's one of those decks where you don't really have much for them in the sideboard. It's one of the big things that they have for you, and one of the things that is the most hard, the most difficult for you to answer is Deafening Silence. That's a card that they play in the sideboard pretty much in every Hogaak that I've seen in recent times. It's very easy for them to play. All they need to play is just 1 Scrubland or 1 Savannah, and they just have access to a card that is like insane in their worst matchup, which is combo. And a lot of decks a lot of combo decks don't really have a good way to answer it because they're mostly blue based and you don't have like an actual artifact or enchantment instruction. So it's really good. So we have the board in Chain of Vapor. Just have to respect the Defending Silence. It's annoying, but we have to bring it in. It's not really the worst because it still answers. It can still like slow them on a turn if it's ever dead, but it's still not very good. If it's not hitting Deafening Silence, but I think it's a necessity. And then we board in 2 Torment. I don't think Nyxa Jailer is a good card in the matchup. I just think that you're not trying to fight on that angle. You're trying to fight with Torment Skip by just stopping them for 1 turn. You're not trying to have a hand rely on the Nyxa Jailer to keep you in the game. And Torment Skip is like such a better card if you're not using it. Like it's such a better card on its own. Such a better card in terms of like helping your combo. Because it counts for Storm Count. It's a Tinker's Artifact Sacrifice. It can improve your Yawgmoth's by being like an artifact you sack and then you recast. It's like a ton of upsides. So I like it in this matchup a lot. So yeah, just board these 3 cards in, and then we board out. Pretty straightforward. Board out Hercule's Recall. You're not trying to bounce artifacts. Board out a Cabal Ritual. It's a pretty free cut, and we cut out Whisper because we actually get our life total pressured a lot of the time, so we don't want it. Again, super simple. Alright, so let's get into game 2. I guess I should have loaded it before. Oopsies. So let's go into. Oh shoot! I misclicked. I went for game 3. A little spoiler. So in game 2, my hand is, it's fine. So the reason that like Defense Grid isn't absolutely horrendous in this matchup is because it is like a direct counter to Force of Vigor. which is like one of the only tools that they have to interact with you. Like it's Force of Vigor and Deafening Silence. Force of Vigor is important because it can, well, it can obviously reduce your Moxin and whatnot, but it can kill Tinker on the stack. Sorry, not kill Tinker. Kill Citadel on the stack, and this is a very big issue, so I think that Defense Grid is absolutely fine in this matchup, maybe even good. It also prevents my trap if they're playing that. I think that it's not a non-0% chance they're playing it, and I think that they're pretty much never going to get 3 mana by the time you're comboing off, most likely. So yeah, I like this hand. It's got an issue by having 2. I don't like that, but it's still fine. We get to cast it on turn 1. They're on the play. They have Leyline. Leyline's annoying and makes our Dark Petitions a lot more awkward. Makes Shaman unplayable. So also one important thing, they discarded Savannah, so that gives us a pretty big hint that they don't have Deafening Silence in hand. Later on, I think they might have played a Scrubland later, which I guess gave me some indication. Maybe that was a different match, but in any case, basically this tells me that it's very unlikely that they have a Deafening Silence in hand, so that's good to know. Now I go for a basic because I think it's just better against Wasteland. I time walk because it's just free value. We don't draw a land, which has been annoying, but it's still fine. Cast Defense Grid. It was a cycle with a chance to like have a lot of upside. They have Bazaar, and they have Rootwalla plus a Tissue Supplier, which has some cast Vengevine, and they get to cast Hogaak. So now we're actually put in a very awkward spot because we're gonna die this turn if we're not able to win. Like if we're gonna die next turn. So we have to go for Black Lotus and go for So here we had to go for some amount of some type of win. I think the way I did it was just bad. I think I was supposed to wait for my draw because I could have just drawn Tinker. I think the way I did that was pretty bad. But in any case, we didn't really have many outs, and so we lost. I think I played that pretty poorly, actually. I think I was supposed to just wait and hope that we draw Tinker exactly, because you really didn't have any outs. Alright. So mistake there. We lose game 2, which isn't the end of the world. I mean, game 3, we're on the play. We're still favored. That was a very specific hand that they have that I think it was very good in the matchup, but yeah. So here, this hand's amazing. I mean, this is really a hand that I like a lot. We have Torment Script, can stop them a little bit. We have the rest if we're really scared about interaction. We have Defense Grid, not the best, but it's like still an artifact, can sacrifice the Thinker, can still matter, can stop a lot of stuff without us having to use the rest. Like it's fine. I mean, I'm not excited about it, but like this hand's fine. So I keep turn 1. I go stab Leyline again. That makes a lot of her outs worse, but it's still fine. We duress. I guess this is the same. So yeah, so we duress. We see their hand is Deafening Silence, which is very scary, but they don't have a way to cast it. And the only way they would ever cast it is by ripping a fetch, and they don't actually pay that many fetches, so I don't want to respect that personally. There's definitely an argument to do it, but I don't want to respect it. And so instead I take Force of Vigor because that can because it can kind of make my win awkward because they have a card to sacrifice to it. And they don't even have a Bazaar. Like they have 0 ways of gaining advantage really in this position if they don't draw exactly fetch. So I think taking Force of Vigor is correct. I think it's very close though. Like there's definitely an argument for Deafening Silence. I don't know. It depends what you want to respect and what you're actually thinking that you're going to win with. In my mind, it was much more likely we were going to win with like a Tinker line because they exiled their graveyard. So yeah, that made more sense to me. And we still have like, and one thing to note is like we still have outs to Deafening Silence, right? Like if we can find our Chain of Vapors, we still have outs. Whereas them having Force of Vigor for our Dual Citadel is a lot more awkward. So here we find a lot of really good cards, and we just had to keep like a Tinker win because it's so easy, and they have like almost nothing they can do against it if they don't. Well, they can't do anything against it because we have Mana Crypt plus Tinker. Okay, yeah, this is a big misplay, by the way. I just want to note that. Like this was a really big misplay. That was poorly played. I basically let them have MBT, and that was a big misplay. So not a fan of how I played that. But we didn't get punished because I don't even know that they play MBT. I'm assuming, I can't remember what exactly happened, but I'm assuming that I actually ended up like looking at a list and saying they didn't have MBT, so I decided to do it this way. But it was probably wrong to do it this way. I could have just gone for Mana Crypt and then done it. Anyway, feeling really good. Not really much that I'm scared of at this. I mean, I'm feeling really good. I'm in semis. I have a 50% chance of playing against Hogaak, another Hogaak player, which is amazing. I mean, that would be fantastic. Like that's like by far our best matchup. So I don't remember what the other matchup was. I believe the other. Oh, I guess it wasn't 50. It was like a 33% chance or whatever. And I ended up pairing against them. So here, since it's the same deck and there's not much else to cut off, I'm gonna go straight to semis. I'm playing against Hogaak again, feeling really good about that. I know Mad Max Ernst is a Hogaak player. They've only played that for like the longest time. I always see them playing in vintage tournaments and getting decent results with it. On the draw, which I'm not a fan of, but this hand is amazing. I mean, this is a hand where I get to Necro, which gives me like a ton of card advantage. Don't really like pushing my life total, but it's still like, don't really like lowering my life total because they play Vengevines and stuff like that. But I still think that this is an amazing hand. And we have like a decent number of draws where we can just draw like a Mox or stuff like that, and we just win. I think this hand's really good. They don't know what I'm on, which is important. Alright, so they get Bashim Walla, they get Holomon. This is a decent amount of pressure. I mean, this is 5 damage a turn. Like, this is very relevant. We have Necro. We play our Mox so that we don't discard with hand size. I don't draw very much because, in my opinion, at this point, all I'm looking for is just mana sources to lock my win. If I don't find them, it's not the end of the world. Now I find something like Time Walk, which is essentially getting a mana, so I'm feeling really good. Social Recall is scary, but it's like, at the end of the day, the only thing I'm really scared of is their Force of Vigor, and I'm not really going to respect that if they... Yeah, and I'm not really going to respect that. It's not impossible that they have it, but it's not very likely. And here, they're dealing 8 damage to me, which means I'm at 7, which is annoying, but it's definitely not, like, a big issue, because we still get the combo. I just want to note, like, it is very much... like doable to win from 7 life. It is a bit hard, but it is definitely doable. If I remember correctly, I believe I like mistap my mana or something like that. I believe I like cast Divining Top, since Divining Top with like when I wasn't supposed to, like I didn't tap one of my color sources, so I almost lost a game due to that, which was a pretty big misplay. But ended up working out. Pretty big misplay. Almost through the game, but hey, we got there, and that's what matters, you know. So yeah, pretty big misplay, but again, they get punished. I will say that's definitely like a real aspect of playing MTGO. Like, there's a lot of technical things that can go wrong. You have to pay You have to pay attention to that stuff. I don't know why it's bugged here. Okay, well, for some reason it's bugged, but I ended up casting Tendrils, just to be clear. Cool. And I won. Alright, so feeling pretty good. I mean, 1 game 1 against a pretty good hand from my opponent. I mean, they had Recall plus Bazaar plus, like, a very fast clock. We still got there. Same sideboarding as earlier. Add 2 Crypt, add a Shane, -1 Whisper, -1 Cabal Ritual, -1 Hercules Recall. I think this hand's awful. Doesn't do anything. This hand's not very good. I'm surprised I kept this, actually. I think it's not great. It does some stuff. I mean, the idea is that it like plays towards Tinker, and that's like still fine. It has Defense Grid, which can like be a hedge against Force of Vigor. Like, I still think it's fine, but it got some issues. But it does have like a decent amount of upside, especially with Torment Script being able to activate Tournament Academy. Not activate it, but like turn it on. That double Hollow One, I mean, that is a very scary start. Like that makes her Tinker line like so much worse. Attack is for 8. And they have Deafening Silence. Yeah. I mean, at this point, there's like, all I can do is just go get Chain of Vapor with my Mystical Tutor and hope that I somehow draw like very, very well with this preordain. And I'm not feeling very confident about the likelihood of that happening at this point. But I still gotta go for it. I mean, that is the out. So I preordain with this first because if I have to like crack my tournament script or something like that, like it's still better to tap this. I get to keep the black mana up. But these cards are not what I want. I just want like gas. Like I just want gas. Like getting cantrips is not good enough. And I don't find gas, and I end up just dying because they deal me 8. I mean, it's very, very difficult to win from that point. I bounce Deafening Silence, which is like the best I can do, and then I draw for turn and I draw nothing. Again, I mean, they had a lot of pressure plus almost unbeatable card, so we lost. Yeah, there you go. Now moving on to game 3. Again, these matchups go by very quickly because this is a very fast-paced matchup. You either have it or you're just dead. It's very simple on both sides. I didn't like that hand. Sorry, I skipped very quickly. It was a hand that was very reactive. Wasn't really aiming towards a combo. I didn't like it. I should skip this hand because I think that any Dark Ritual, Lotus obviously, maybe even Moxjet, can get me to like a win on turn 2. And on top of that, we have a Ponder to even like make our odds of hitting that much better. So I like this hand a lot. My opponent mulls to 5, which I'm very happy to see. So here I see Recall, Blue Delta, Underground Sea. I choose to keep, if I remember correctly, because my reasoning is that like the chances of me hitting with Recall are kind of high. Or like high enough because I'm gonna at least fetch away a land. Like I still think it's fine. I don't think it's perfect. Might be wrong, but I feel pretty good about it. They Bazaar, they discard these 3 cards. To me, this signifies that they might have a Force of Vigor hand, but they discard a lot of green cards, so I'm not too sure about that. And they might just be digging towards like something to turn on these Vengevines and stuff like that. So here I recall first. And actually I have Misstep, which is really annoying. That puts me in a pretty bad position. But next turn I'm just going to get to... Yeah, here I just cast Mana Bolt, so that next turn I'm basically able to cast Dark Petition and have it turn on because I have 2 instant sorceries in my graveyard. And there I would be able to get Tinker and just win from that position. I mean, it would be a little risky because I'd have to like hope I don't hit a land, but I still think it's just like correct from that point. They get Vengevine, deal me 4. I mean, it's relevant damage, but at this point I think I'm very much in the driver's seat. They have Hollow One. That pretty much signifies to me that I'm not in the driver's seat. Like I'm gonna have to go for the win next turn. Makes the decision easy for me. And here I happen to draw Dark Crit, which is like probably my best draw in the deck, like one of my best draws in the deck, to make sure that I don't whiff because I can just cast Dark Crit, cast Dark Petition, and still have blue up where I don't have to play my land. So yeah, so at this point, pretty straightforward win. I'm fucking ecstatic. I mean, I'm making the finals. Feels amazing. That being said, it is still almost, I think, 9 a.m., something like that. Yeah, around that. It is very late. I am almost delirious to this point. You know, I'm still playing like somewhat cleanly, but like definitely feeling the pressure, and I'm heading into finals. Ready to win it all because it's either against Shops, which I'm not very confident, but I'm pretty confident I can beat, or against 4-Color Breach, against Ekaros, who I mean I beat before and I felt okay in the matchup. So, and I was really really looking to get my revenge for that matchup. So anyway, I'll see you guys in finals. All right, here we are in the finals, the most important match of all. I'm against, well, that's maybe not sound true, but yeah, I'm against, let me hide the game log actually. So I'm against Benibo, who I lost against in the Swiss. I know that they are on Golos Shops. I am on the play, which is amazing. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better than that. On the play against Chops, feels really, really good. I have a turn 1 kill, if I'm correct about this. Dark Crit. Okay, no, it's not a turn 1 kill. No, it is, my bad. It is a turn 1 kill. So basically it's Black Lotus, Mox Burl, to Iron Academy. I guess I'll like play through it. So I keep this every time. Lane and the Void actually doesn't matter here because I was never getting Spell Mastery anyway, so it's fine. So here I play Black Lotus, I play Mox Bro, I tap for 2 blue, crack the Black Lotus, play my Dark Writ, use my Dark Petition, and then we were able to get Tinker, and we just win. I mean, obviously there's a chance we whiff, but at this point, I still think we're obligated to go for that line, because there's such a high chance they have a Sphere effect, especially since they know what the matchup is. And I happen to rip Necro off the top instantly. Perfect card to hit, although there are many other cards that were good to hit as well. This is just kind of the perfect one because it allows us to never whiff, and there we go, we just win. Super straightforward. I mean, I'm up a game in the finals. This is very, very nice. And I'm on the draw in the game too, but I mean, I've won on the draw before against Shops. It's not impossible. It is a bit annoying that they know to match up somewhat well at least, but feeling alright. Sideboarding is the same as earlier. I'm not going to show it again. It's against the same opponent anyway. Just go up on Recalls, go up on Hercules, go up on Chain, go up on Snow Covered Island, go up on Bicycle Colossus, and that's it. Sick at opening hands. This hand is great in my opinion. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very unlikely my opponent doesn't have some amount of like Sphere resistance or something like that, but at the end of the day, I just need to keep any side type of hand that's able to combo fast, because it's very, very rare they're able to keep a reactive hand, which is to say a hand that gets to cast Circle's Recall with like not much else, but it still has like a bunch of mana on the draw and still get there. In my experience, I think that's not a good hand to keep, so I keep this hand, and I decided to go for a turn 1. I'm ready to go for a turn 1. They don't play anything turn 1. To me, alright, so let's just stop for a second. This can mean a few things. So the first thing is they have Memory Trap. This is a card they need to be cognizant in the matchup. I'll be honest, I hadn't encountered it really yet in the tournament, but I was still aware that it existed. I wasn't really paying too much mind to it because at the end of the day, it's 9:30 a.m. I've been playing for like 6-7 hours, maybe something like that, maybe 8. 7 hours, something like that, in the middle of the night. Like I'm not thinking about everything. I'll be honest. Like I think it's important to be like forward about your mistakes and stuff like that. I was not really thinking about it. I was cognizant it might exist in the back of my brain, but yeah. So that's a possibility. The other possibility, like basically, you have to consider, well, why would they keep this hand? If it doesn't have a Sphere effect, there's 2 possibilities. Either it has MBT, or it has something like maybe Trinisphere, maybe Losum Golem, maybe Mirage Mirror with like a depth skill. I mean, that would be a very bad hand to keep. I think they kept on 7. Yeah, they kept on 7. So I would definitely say that it's looking like an MBT. It's quite likely, and I think that there's definitely a way to play around that, a very easy way even. And so I think I played this game poorly. I will say that from the get-go. I go for Bullets to Citadel, like completely balls to the wall. I think that is incorrect. I think the right way to play this game would be to put Underground Sea on the board, Mystical Tutor. Yeah, that is also the issue, is that there's some amount of risk to respecting the MBT, because if they have Wasteland and they didn't have MBT, or I guess they can also have both. If they have Wasteland basically and we go for something slower, they can just remove any mana source, and we definitely don't have any guarantee we're going to draw it. So we're kind of put in this awkward spot where like we have to decide whether we want to play around Wasteland or play around MBT. I chose to play around Wasteland. And then I just play like as hard into it because it doesn't really matter at this point. Like I just cast both, I cast all 3 Rits I think, which is wrong, but it isn't like the end of the world. Yeah, I was definitely wrong, but it wasn't really the end of the world. So cast Citadel, they have Memory Trap, feels really bad. I think that I should have taken longer time to think about this. I got in a rush. Again, like I really want to talk about this in a specific match because I think that it's relevant and it is important to explain my point of view in this game. My point of view is I just won game 1. I'm up a game in finals. 2nd top 8 ever in a challenge. I'm feeling very excited. I love this deck. I'm feeling good. And I'm like, yeah, just go for it. I mean, I think it's gonna work out. Like, it just feels like the stars are aligning. It feels like it's time to go for it. And I don't even think it's necessarily like the wrong play. I think it might be correct. Obviously, the third Dark Wit definitely not correct, but like I kind of feel good about this. I mean, I still feel like this is probably the better line than to hold for Mystical Tutor because Wasteland and Shipmine are such a concern. Yeah, so and Ghost Quarter can still be like kind of an issue as well. And top deck Sphere obviously is also a huge issue. Like that's also something you gotta keep in mind. So I think that it was right to go for the Bosicella there, but there's definitely an argument for saying that it wasn't, and for trying to go for a line where we're trying to ignore. I'm not sure what's correct. Again, I'm just trying to give you the best insight I can. So they have Wasteland, so they actually had Wasteland plus NBT, would have gotten punished either way. And here we draw Vampire Tutor, doesn't really matter. I just choose to wait around, just see what they have. They have Thorn, basically means there's no way I'm getting out of this game. We're super, super far behind. Probe is fine. We see Stage and Crypt, not really too much to worry about. So here they have Golos. Golos gets depths. They basically are gonna have like a free depths next turn. And yeah, so we're just dead. There's no draw here that would make us win the game, so we're dead. Feels really bad. I mean, I definitely got punished all the way. I don't think that no matter how we would have played this game, we would have won, which is something to keep in mind. Actually, I'm certain that we would have won. Which feels really bad, but not much you can do. I mean, against me on a draw in this matchup is very rough. MBT is a super difficult card, like a super troublesome card in post-board games. It just sucks, yeah. So, I'll admit, feeling pretty down. I mean, that was a very, very strong hand for the opponent. I will admit that, like, I probably shouldn't have gotten this set because at the end of the day, if they weren't having a hand like Wasteland and BT, they had a hand with Sphere. So basically, I still wouldn't be able to win most likely. Although it was more likely. Anyway, all that to say that I lose game 2, going into game 3. I'm like a little all over the place. It's very stressful. Matamundo does very well in high stress situations, but in any case, this hand's interesting. So this hand allows me the Dark Petition, which is good. It allows me to Tasking Probe, which is interesting. It can help play around some stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not doing anything on turn 1 that puts me very far ahead. And in a matchup where I'm afraid of Sphere Resistance and Thorn of Amethyst and stuff like that, I think you need to be playing something very, very aggressive and powerful. So I don't really like this hand, so I'm mulligan it. Here I keep a hand actually quite similar to last game, where I have a Golos Citadel on turn 1. I think Golos Citadel on turn 1 is a totally good play. I really like it. I think it puts you very far ahead, and it really only loses to my Break Trap, which, again, one thing to consider is that there's a good chance that my opponent's going to keep a hand, like a hand on the draw that has a higher chance of having MBT. They also don't have Leyline, something to consider. So there's definitely an argument for playing around it. And here, yeah, I didn't play around it. And I think that was a mistake. I think from the get-go in game 1, right here, I make a mistake. By not taking long to consider what happens to MBT. And this is kind of the story of this whole match you'll see very soon. It's not considering what your opponent might have. And, there's so many factors I can name. I mean, there's like me being tired, there's me being anxious, there's being like in such a weird matchup, and like, there's a lot of factors that are affecting my decisions, but at the end of the day, it is just a clear lesson in taking a second to breathe, thinking about your position in the matchup, thinking about sideboarding, thinking about your opponent might have, thinking about what hands they keep. And it's something I didn't do in this situation. I didn't think about what hands it would keep, or at least I didn't think about it hard enough, because here there's two options. Either they just kept on 7, which is also hard to believe. Like hard to believe that they don't have a very good hand on 7 with a Sphere and maybe a Wasteland or something like that, or maybe a Chalice. Like That's not very likely. Let's be honest. I mean, it's possible, but it's not very likely. And the higher likelihood is that they have MBT. Not just chance they have MBT plus Memory Trap. Sorry, I'm not sure if I've said it fully yet, but there's a chance they have Memory Trap plus Fear. That's definitely a possibility, and then we get punished pretty freaking hard. But we're gonna get punished anyway, so it's like, I think that the correct line here is probably go to Preordain and hope they don't have a Sphere and they actually had a hand on the draw that relied on Memory Trap. That's not what I did. I went for Dark Ritual. I get Memory Trapped, as you can imagine. Pretty frustrated. I mean, this is a very frustrating spot. Like, I'm playing for the finals. I'm playing for to win the entire tournament, which would be like, which probably among like one of my biggest dreams in terms of playing Magic Online. I'd say probably the biggest actually. And I get Memory Trapped, and I'm like, you know, I mean, it's pretty crushing. Like, and I'm not saying like, I'm not trying to be like a pity case or whatever. I'm trying to explain like it is a very crushing moment to be like, oh gosh, I was so close. If that worked, I'm almost 100% sure I would have won. And it doesn't. And it doesn't because they have the really good card in the matchup. So, on turn 1, they have Wasteland. Brutal. I mean, brutal stuff. They have Mox Pearl, Mox Sapphire, Black Lotus. And I'm like, oh, they're just going to sign something? They don't actually have anything in hand. Which is a really, really good sign. I mean, well, that's not true. Which is reassuring in that they at least don't have anything else to pressure me. I mean, I still have some breathing room. And I happen to draw land, and I'm like, wow, okay, perfect, right? Get back into the game, cast this Preordain, get back some card advantage. Here I choose to bottom both, because I think that I just need to find gas. I need to dig for a Tinker, because I'm on a very short clock, right? Like, I have a very clear window in which I'm going to be able to not be too pressured, because they clearly didn't have anything. But that's what it is. It is a window. Like, I need to catch that opportunity. And keeping stuff like Duress or keeping stuff like Dark Ritual is just not realistic. They have Chip Mine. Brutal stuff. I mean, this was some of the worst case scenario for a lot of stuff. Also signifies that I would most likely have lost if I'd played around in BT. Sphere Resistance, absolutely brutal. I mean, this is rough. You know, like, I've lost the game at this point. In my mind, like, and again, I want to talk about the psychology of it. Like, at this point, I've lost the game, but I'm gonna play it out. I mean, I'm not conceding finals to something like that, right? So, I have Chain of Vapor, which is really good. For answering that Sphere Resistance. And then they happen to draw into Mirage Mirror, which again, I want to say they drew into the Sphere. Very frustrating, but again, as much as I'm allowed to draw into land after getting Strip Mined and Wasteland, they're allowed to draw into Sphere, sure, right. Then Mirage Mirror, and I'm like, okay, cool, alright, well, that sucks. I mean, they have the Dark Depths, last card in hand. Wow, okay. I mean, that's pretty rough. I mean, they top decked Mirage Mirror, and they even had the Dark Depths to go with it, plus the Sphere. How the hell did I win this, right? Then I remember, I have Chain of Vapor. That's an answer to Dark Depths. A really funny one, but it happens to be an answer. And I draw Harko's Recon, and I'm like, and I'm slowly piecing it together. I'm like, okay, so if I'm able to draw enough lands, enough mana sources to be able to recall on their end step, if I'm able to draw well, I can get out of this. And at the end of the day, there's a good chance they're going to go for the Dark Depth skill at this point. I mean, it makes sense. And so I also have a good chance to be able to, you know, negate it. So here, they create the Merit Lage. I went until their turn. I just think there's not really any rush. They lose life to Mana Crypt, important to note. And I bounce their Merit Lage. Sorry about the clinking noise, by the way. I hope that's not too annoying. I don't believe there's shortcuts for passing in VODs or replays. I'm not sure though. Now they draw Inventor's Fair. Pretty brutal. I'm gonna be honest. That is a very brutal draw to see, because this means that not only did they draw into something, they drew into a card that basically that's gonna get any artifact that would be perfect to this situation. So I wait. I draw Vampire Tutor, not very useful. I mean, I'm very far from doing anything. They have a Register. Again, going back into the state of like, yeah, I'm doing this. I mean, there's no way. Here they go get Mirage Mirror, which I find interesting, but then I realized that the idea is that they're going to cast Mirage Mirror and copy Sphere Resistance to basically lock me out of the game. It makes sense. I think that's a fine card to get. There's a chance you're just supposed to get Sphere Resistance. I'm not sure. Here I'm drawing into nothing. Not much is going on. they're up to one card that they haven't done anything with, but I mean, and that they didn't play as a land, right? That's one thing that's important to note, right? They drew one card that they didn't play as a land the last turn, the turn after they sacked Invictus Sphere, and they also didn't, like, they could basically cast anything at this point. That being said, it's also important to keep in mind that, let's say this is what could this be? Like, let's say this is like a Golos, like any amount of artifacts that are like too impactful in this spot. It's important to keep in mind that they wouldn't cast them because they would want to be able to keep activating that Mirage Mirror to lock us out of the game, right? So just again, like details to keep in mind, right? Here I cast Manifold, or I want to cast Manifold, but I'm not able to. They lose life to Mana Crypt, important to note. But like, we're very far from Mana Crypt mattering enough, right? They draw another card that they don't play, important to note. But again, like, I'm in position where, like, I'm really, I just want to make it clear, like, I'm not thinking about this. I'm not even thinking about this because I'm in a mindset where I'm out of the game and I'm not really paying much attention. But looking back over the replay and trying to analyze what went down, I don't think that I was necessarily supposed to put them on any card, really. Like this could be a variety of cards that they would have drawn, cards that cost too much to be able to hold up Mirage Mirror as well. It's very possible. I mean, they have free resistance like that. That makes a lot of their draws kind of worse in a way. Up to 2 cards, sure. Here, yeah, they keep doing it. We got Necro useless. Pretty much all of this stuff is like very useless. It doesn't do anything. They're up to 4 cards. Now, I think them being up to 4 cards means a lot, right? It's very important to keep in mind. Here they actually didn't activate Mirage Mirror, which I think is really important to note because that means they missed an activation, and it's too late after that if I get to my main phase, right? So then I cast the Back Lotus, they realize, oh shoot, let me activate Mirage Mirror. Sure, I would still have been able to cast Back Lotus anyway. Then they draw Wasteland. It's annoying, doesn't really affect our specific board at the moment though. And then I draw Mox Ruby, and they didn't activate Mirage Mirror. So again, this is all relying on them not activating it. I don't know why they weren't activated at this point. I'm not exactly sure. I assume they were just kind of certain they would win the game, and they thought I was just trying to play it out, which is fair. Then I passed a mistake again, and I actually cast Manifold because they didn't activate it. That being said, we would have been able to resolve the Mox Ruby that turn, so we would have had Manifold next turn. Important to keep in mind. They're at 5. So here, they have Midrange Workshop. They activate. They're like, oh shoot, I can't forget about that anymore. And then I draw Golos Recall. Golos Recall, not really important here. We already have one that we're planning to cast on their end step, possibly. But this is really where there's a very big decision to make. Do I, with this hand, I believe, basically the question is, do I believe that it is better to let my opponent wait it out, and die to the Mana Crypt, which is again can take a lot of turns depending on how lucky your opponent is. But the big issue with this hand at the moment is that the only way that we can win with this hand, as is, the only way we can win this hand if we Hurkyl's Recall them, is by playing into Mindbreak Trap. And they're at 4 cards. They're at 4 single cards that they've drawn over multiple turns and that they didn't ever play. And they even had Mishra's Workshop last turn. That's a big tell. That's a very, very big tell that they must be keeping something in hand. Like, they need to be something in hand. And I think that this is where I should have picked up the clue that they were on Mindbreak Trap. And I think this is where I didn't even pay attention. But what you need to keep in mind is that at this point, I'm more in the mindset of like, oh, finally, I drew something that lets me, like, I'm at the point where I believe I can even get out of this. I mean, I get to my Hurkyl's Recall combo, I get to do my thing, and that's all I have my eyes on. And this is where I made the big mistake. I mean, this is something that I regret a lot, and I feel very embarrassed about. But I'm putting it out there because I think that's a good lesson. And you know, again, like I said earlier, taking a second to breathe and not messing up, right? So what I shouldn't have done, in my opinion, is just with this specific hand, I think you're just supposed to let it go. I think you're just supposed to not do anything, to let your opponent get the turn, and to hope they draw to the mana crypt triggers. I mean, you're very, very close to it. Just 2 to 3 turns maybe is good enough, maybe 4 or 5 at most, and they're not doing anything because obviously, if you think about it, they're trying to keep mana up to activate Mindbreak Trap through their own sphere resistance. That's what's happening. But I didn't put them on that at all, and then again, they don't lose life that turn. However, they do play Mystic Forge, and this is also a card that pressured me and made me feel like I needed to go for something because they were getting a lot of advantage from that card, most likely, right? Now they cast Mirage Mirror. And one really important thing to note, I think, here is this is a weird spot because there's no reason that they should go for Mirage Mirror here, realistically, because they would just be able to cast it next turn, right, and not be able to hold a mana. So I think that it is not unrealistic to say that this kind of throws you off of the Mindbreak Trap possibility, right? Because in a way, I mean, if they're going for this, then clearly they're not worried about mana anymore. They were just, maybe they just had 2 Mirage Mirrors for a while or something like that. Well, no, maybe they had Mirage Mirror they wanted to play. Maybe, I don't know. This is a play that really confuses me. In any case, I go for it. Hierarchos Recall. And this is a really embarrassing moment. And this is what I want to take a minute to hop on. Important to note that they discard 2 Mirage Mirrors, right? 2 of the Mirage Mirrors that we saw. And they also discard Dark Depths, which is interesting. Oh, no, that was already in the graveyard. They also discard Inventor's Fair, which is curious. Or Mana Crypt and 2 Ley Lines, right? So that gives us that... Yeah, my bad. Sorry. I'll recap. They discard 2 Mirage Mirrors, 1 Mana Crypt, 2 Ley Lines. This signifies that of those 4 cards that we might have been worried about, they were Ley Line. 2 Ley Lines were a part of those cards. Which is very curious, and I mean, also tells us like, oh, okay, well, maybe their hand just wasn't that good. And then I draw Tendrils. Now, if you're quick-witted, you probably will notice that we basically won the game. We won the game. They're at 4. All we need to do is simply sack this Black Lotus, cast back Cabal Ritual, and just Tendrils. It's that simple. You won the entire challenge. Now, the issue is, I've spent the past maybe 2-3 minutes tanking, trying to find the line to be able to win. I focused on Yawgmoth's Vampire Tutor. I'm basically not even putting my opponent on Mindbreak Trap at all. I'm actually possibly putting them on 1, but I believe that there's a chance I can win around it. Actually, that's not true. That'd be a lie. I wasn't putting them on Mindbreak Trap at all, because to me, it's like Ley Line, that Mirage Mirror, double Mirage Mirror, they played into it. They were not even holding it up. Like, it's over. Like, they don't have it, right? This is it. So I just go for the win. I don't even think about that line of Cabal Ritual Tendrils. I do Hurkyl's Recall to raise my storm count. Again, this is even here, rewatching it is kind of hard to watch. I go for Manifold, Black Lotus. I go for Cabal Ritual. Just playing like so hard into my Mindbreak Trap. Go for Vamp. So that way, if this doesn't go right, I still have Tinker, right? For Bicel Colossus, if anything doesn't go right. Just like one of those safety things. And I'm like, okay, they had 1 Mindbreak Trap. That's kind of rough. And then they have 2 Mindbreak Traps. So my opponent had, over the turn, drawn 2 Ley Lines and exactly 2 Mindbreak Traps in the 4 cards they didn't play. Brutal. Very frustrating. But at the end of the day, there was no reason I was supposed to lose to that. I could have simply waited. That was one option. I could have simply Urkel's Recalled and won with 10 Cabal Ritual Tendrils. I had that played around Mindbreak Trap. I had many ways of not losing this game, and I did not see them. And that's on me, right? No matter how lucky my opponent got. I actually had the better hand. Anyway, I go for a Necro. That's what I have left with my mana. I'm desperately trying to find something. But at the end of the day, I don't have any more win cons. Like, I don't... All I have left is Bicel Colossus. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's not too bad, right? Because I'm like in panic mode, right? I'm like, oh, wait, okay, so I can play around Bicel Colossus. And that's actually a reason I think I played this even poorly as well. Because I probably didn't need to draw that many cards. Oh, no, I did. Okay, so my reasoning here for drawing that many cards is, well, there's a chance I hit Bicel Colossus. There's a higher chance that I'm able to find mana to be able to cast this Tinker into this position. Because they can have multiple spheres, right? And here they cast a Mystic Forge. They recast it. Mox Pearl. And they have another Mirage Mirror, which means that this was either the card on top or the draw for turn, basically. Actually, that's not true. It couldn't have been card on top. But it could have been their draw for turn. Yeah, it was the card on top after Mystic Forge was the third Mirage Mirror, and I'm crushed. I mean, basically this is GG. It's not possible to win. It's not possible to win here because there's no line where I can both get I can't win Blightsteel because they can just copy it. I'll let the game play out. I don't really want to comment on it. I went for Blightsteel, not because I made the mistake. Again, just really gotta put yourself in like my shoes. I'm in panic mode. I'm like, I'm losing, and I just need to go for something. I go for Blightsteel, not realizing that Blightsteel has Infect, and so if my opponent's Blightsteel attacks me, I'm gonna lose. I go down this amount of life hoping that there's some sort of line that maybe I didn't see that allows me to win through this. And there isn't. Let me tell you that much. I'm also trying to find Chain of Vapor because, again, in my mind, if my opponent copies my Blightsteel, I can just block it and it's fine. Not realizing how Infect works when it's deductible. So, anyway, I mean, again, this is mostly just stuff that, like, me panicking, just trying to go for stuff, just randomly do, and it doesn't really matter at that point. Just to be clear, though, why I played this poorly, and obviously I had the wrong assumptions, it's not actually possible to win from this spot, because the only way you can stop them is with another Hercules, and I believe I'm out of Hercules, and another Chain of Vapor, which, well, Chain of Vapor doesn't work, so yeah. It's just over. Yeah, and that's how you lose the finals. So here I don't know how. I think it's bugged because it's over. Yeah. So really, really sad way to end the tournament. Obviously, I mean, I was very excited. I actually had the finals win, but I just simply missed a very simple line because I got tunnel vision. I'm freaking out. I'm like excited. I'm at so many things at the same time. I drew a card. Didn't see a very obvious line that I would see 99% of the time if I wasn't, in such an awful position. If I wasn't so tunnel vision. And that's the end. All right. So I'm just gonna go back to my deck. And just give some reflections. So, obviously, very disappointing end, but still, overall, I mean, a very, very, like, dope fucking finish. I mean, second place in a vintage challenge is not something I thought I was going to get anytime soon, in any challenge, really. I'm not someone who's, like, the most competitive grinder. I just play events whenever I feel like it. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. And this was a really good one, and it felt really good. I mean, Vintage is a format that I like. It's a format I had a lot of fun playing. I love DPS. It's a deck I've loved for a very long time. And it was very, very satisfying to win with this deck because I do think this deck is good. Like, I will say that much, and you're free to disagree, but I think this deck is good. I think this deck has the tools to win in so many matchups. I think the sideboard is good. I think right now that this whole version with 4 defense grids is such a cool version, and I find it very good. And yeah, I just think it's cool to maybe like finally get a finish for this deck, or at least like in my time playing the deck, finally like get a chance to prove the deck is pretty good. Yeah. Again, I guess all I can say is, if you think this deck is cool, give it a shot. It's really, really fun. I think and I've talked to other people, and most of them agree that this is like one of the most fun things to do in Vintage. It's just such a fun deck to play. Like, there's so many cool lines that you find in so many weird spots. There's so many matches where you can find like interesting ways to win through some very difficult situations. It's just satisfying. I mean, you just get to tutor. You get so many tutors in the deck. I mean, tutors are fun. Tutors are fun in my opinion. Combo decks or tutors are just like super satisfying because they give you so many interesting lines. Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on Twitter. My hat is Akashi73. I'll put it in the description or something. And feel free to reach out. I have my DMs open if you have any questions on the deck. If you want to ask in the comments of this video as well, feel free to. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry, this wasn't like some perfect video where I don't make any mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. It just, and I think that it's a good thing. At the end of the day, overall, I think that making mistakes is a fine thing. And it's better to look over them and try to analyze them than just like feeling like you're such a bad player because of them, because that's not the case in most scenarios. Yeah, thanks for watching.